Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies, recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Emilio.
I'm Madeline.
And I'm Julian. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together, talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Seriously, we would love to hear from you. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok for updates, highlights, clips, and other visual supplements to the audio we record at Sleepless Cinematic Pod.
And in addition to these main episodes, we record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit. While we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we wrap up our current episode cycle of New York City movies with a category that we call Close Up, a deeper dive into the career of a professional in the movie business. We usually stay away from big names and focus on more lesser-known figures like character actors, writer-directors, or in this case, a cinematographer, and discuss at least 3 of their representative works and characteristics that exist throughout.
And those 3 movies this evening, we are starting with The French Connection from 1971, directed by William Friedkin. And then, guys, what other 2 movies are we discussing?
We'll also be discussing The Taking of Pelham 123, released in 1974, directed by Joseph Sargent, starring Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw.
And we're also going to be discussing Network, the film from 1976, directed by Sidney Lumet, written by Paddy Chayefsky, starring William Holden, Faye Dunaway, Peter Finch, and Robert Duvall, amongst others. And all 3 of these films share a cinematographer, the subject of our discussion today.
And that cinematographer is Owen Roizman. He had a very busy 70s.
Yes,
he really
very
did.
Much.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. French Connection onward, it just kind of skyrocketed from there. And joining us for this conversation, we do have a 4th member. So if you listen to our podcast, you don't have to dig too deep to know that we're all big fans of one of the greatest podcasts out there, WTF with Marc Maron. And if you listen to that podcast, you don't have to dig too deep to know that it is primarily a 2-man operation. One half of that, of course, being Marc himself, and the other half being our guest for this episode, the producer of WTF, with many additional production credits to his name across television and radio, as well as the co-author of the WTF companion book, Waiting for the Punch, and, as of the last few years, a regular on-the-mic presence in the show's bonus feed, The Full Maron. If you subscribe to that, you can hear him frequently on Tuesdays and always on The Friday Show, where he and co-host Chris Lopresto recap the week in WTF and discuss an assortment of topics chosen both by them and listeners, not limited to, but often relating to movies, in such forms as a series on the films of Quentin Tarantino, deep dives into recent critical duds like Madam Web and The Beekeeper, and for our purposes, one very notable episode in which they list their favorite New York City movies. And I, of course, am talking about Brendan McDonald. Welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you, everybody.
Welcome.
That was the most professional introduction I've ever gotten. I feel like I'm like
Thank
Tom
you.
Sawyer or something, listening to my funeral.
Oh, wow. Oh, my. Well, this is definitely not going to be your funeral.
Okay, good.
You are
thanks
safe
so
in our
much-
presence.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah,
Oh, my
thank you.
pleasure. No, when you let me know, Julian, that this was something you guys were doing, New York movies. You asked me to come on. It was a no-brainer to say yes. I love doing this. Love talking about this stuff. It's in my blood.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And we'll get deeper into it, but I think to varying degrees, it's in all of our respective bloods too.
Yeah.
That's true.
For
We can
sure.
all call ourselves New Yorkers in some respects, right?
Yeah.
In some respects, I've only been here 7 years. I think you have to be here 10. So I don't know if I can call myself that quite yet. Julian, you of everyone here can the most call yourself this because you've lived here your whole life.
My whole life, yes.
Yeah.
Born and raised. And yeah, I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn and Park Slope, and now I live in Ridgewood, Queens. But I've always been in or near to New York. The furthest I ever got away was 4 years of college in Westchester at Sarah Lawrence. But even that, I mean, it's
Close
like
enough.
five
Close
minutes
enough.
outside the city. So yeah, I'm dyed in the wool. Emilio, I mean, you've been here much of your life too.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I crossed that point where I've been in New York longer than I haven't been in New York.
Yeah.
So I've been here about 20 years now. And I, in an inverse of you, Julian, came here for college.
Mm-hmm.
And you never left.
And I never left. I stuck around. I mean, you could argue that I'm taxed in New Jersey because I do
true.
live just on the other side of the water.
But your place of employment is in New York
That's
City.
correct. Yeah. One of my places of employment is here in New York. Very cool. What about you, Brendan?
I was born in Queens. Kew Gardens was the neighborhood, and lived there until I was 10. And this was in the 80s. And in 1990, we moved to upstate New York, pretty far upstate, about 3 hours north. And that's where I went to high school. But I came back to New York to go to college like you did. And I was at Fordham in the Bronx. And then from there moved to Brooklyn. Windsor Terrace is the neighborhood. And I've been there since 2001. So same neighborhood with a couple different spots, but just generally same, like, few blocks. So,
Wow.
yeah, I've been going on 24 years now.
Yeah, and well, yeah, since you've been there that long, we've probably passed each other without knowing it sometimes before.
That's
I'm
probably
sure.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, even though I live in my own place now, my parents still live in Park Slope, and I visit them frequently, so I still am very, very familiar around there.
Yeah, and it's a great place to walk around. So, like, of course, like, you know, you wind. I sometimes see people there that I'm like, I haven't seen that person in 30 years, and then they just crop up in Park Slope. But
Yeah.
that's how it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially like after I went to college and met a lot of people who were transplants coming to New York, I felt like after college, I kind of didn't have to do anything to keep on seeing those people.
Yeah.
They just, it was like a tractor beam. They just came flooding back into the city.
Totally.
Many of the great things about New York, and we'll get into some more of those as we discuss all of these movies. Before we get into specific movies, I feel like it's worth saying a little bit about Owen Roizman, the person.
Totally.
Oh, let's do it.
Well, for my part, this name, Owen Roizman, became crystallized in my head after I had a very, I think, fateful first viewing of one of the movies that we're discussing tonight, Pelham 123, which was almost 2 years before this recording. I saw it at the Film Forum on Memorial Day 2023. And, you know, it being a holiday, it was a packed theater. It was just one of those experiences that I feel like you just know while you're experiencing it, I'm never going to forget this. And this is just like, forget that it depicts a great New York moment. The moment itself of watching it is a great New York moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that to all of you here, that if you hadn't seen it in a theater, that's a must do.
That seems like a great
for
theater
that
movie
specifically, it kills. Like
It
the
does,
audience is howling with laughter.
Yeah, I can personally attest to that. And yeah, I think that it got like 3 curtain calls.
Yeah.
Between like, well, actually, this is worth noting too. There was, of course, the end of the movie with that iconic shot of Walter Matthau. And then when the credits were over, applause at both points. But before that, something that showed at the Film Forum that day, which listeners, if you subscribe to Criterion Channel, you can see this yourselves. It's a short documentary about representation of the New York City subway in film. It's hosted by one of Film Forum's artistic directors, Bruce Goldstein, and he talks a little bit about how the subway has generally appeared on film, and basically saying that The Taking of Pelham 123 is the most accurate subway movie ever. And in that short documentary, he mentioned Owen Roizman by name.
As he should.
Yes, stating that the cinematography of this film is one of the things that really makes it this classic, something that is very much of its time and yet kind of timeless too.
There's also some really good subway cinematography in The French Connection.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think he wouldn't have gotten the Pelham job if not for The French Connection.
Yeah. One thing that I didn't know until I started reading up about Owen Roizman is that he's actually a second generation camera guy.
I found that out.
Yeah. His dad used to work for Fox as a newsreel cameraman. And after TV put a lot of those guys out of a job, he started working and doing more commercial work. And that's actually where Owen Roizman kind of first got his start.
Yeah.
Which is his dad kind of gave him a leg up, and he worked as like an assistant cameraman and started from there. He did an interview with a podcast quite a while ago, maybe about 15 years ago at this point, called Legends of Film.
I listened to this as well.
Yeah. I thought it was really sweet. He added at the very end, I think my dad would be astounded to know what my career was like, because his father passed away before his success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think his dad probably passed along to him something really important, which was that he was a newsreel photographer.
Yeah.
Totally.
And prior to World War II, everything was shot on sets, in studios, right? It's really only after audiences spent 6 years in movie theaters watching newsreel footage that they became accustomed to basically documentary filmmaking.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so now you're in the 50s, those guys are starting to, not get the opportunities, but they're moving into television. And I can only imagine, obviously you said his credits are commercials, and then he makes one kind of minimally seen film before getting the French Connection. You think, how did a guy with that kind of limited resume make this insanely difficult movie to shoot? Like it's one of it's in the top tier of super hard movies to shoot, and I'm it's got to be in his DNA to and just what he absorbed through osmosis of his dad's craft.
Yeah,
Totally.
I was reading in Masters of Light, which is a collection of conversations with cinematographers. I love this guy's attitude. Like, if you read what he has to say about his perspective on work, it's about showing up. It's about learning on every job. He always says he always felt like he was a better cinematographer after every film that he made. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that, like you said, feels a little crazy when right out the gate, you have something that feels kind of like anybody else's masterwork.
Yeah.
But that he had it so early, I think not only gave him a lot of confidence and cachet as a cinematographer, but also gave him, I think, a little bit of freedom to explore a little bit. Like, I think one of the films he made right after The French Connection is a film that we recently spoke about that I love, which is The Heartbreak Kid.
Yeah.
And that's a very different film. And he talks about, how differently you shoot comedies.
Yeah.
How much light there is. There's a lot of light in that movie. A lot of it takes place in Florida on the beach. So he was able to experiment, I think, rather quickly right out the gate and really take those kind of jobs where he would be able to put a new feather in his cap right away, which I just think is awesome.
Yeah. Just constantly expanding his skill set.
Yeah, and I think when you watch a lot of his representative movies, I mean, there's this kind of documentary realism that shines through. But it's worth saying, too, that I think the most watched movie that he shot is something that is so not that, which is almost without contest, The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And so more people are familiar with Owen Roizman's imagery than even know that they are.
Can I tell my story about The Exorcist?
Please.
Yes.
I saw The Exorcist at IFC last year around Halloween. And about halfway through the showing, somebody walks in to the theater, takes a flash photograph of the audience and is like, "Enjoy the movie, folks," and walks out. Which I think is one of the weirdest theater experiences I've ever had.
Definitely doesn't set you at a good first step.
This is 45 minutes in.
I would desperately want to know what that person does. Do they do that in all? Do they just have a scrapbook of this is the time I took a picture of the Exorcist audience?
And I'm how did he get this far? IFC checks your ticket at the door.
Yeah,
so were they there to see a different movie? He didn't come back.
Right.
But so those are some of Owen Roizman's images that are enshrined in the pantheon of film history. But then when you think about his influence too, I mean, of course, there's some in the horror genre for obvious reasons. But then, when you think about these New York movies we're discussing, they alone stand the test of time. But then, another really important movie that's come out very recently, Anora, is very indebted to his style of filming things. I think that was even a conscious intention on Sean Baker's part while making that movie. In fact, we discussed Anora in the episode previous to this one, so check that out if you haven't already. But then in thinking about what makes this brand of cinematography so special, I mean, I think of this quote from Pauline Kael, which is not about Owen Roizman specifically, but it's about New York on film, which is just that New York City is always New York City. It can't be anything else. And with practically no studios for fakery, the movie companies use what's really there. And so I feel like that, in a nutshell, describes what is so enticing about the images that Owen Roizman set to film.
We've watched West Side Story, the original, and we've commented on how, some of those sets they stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, the balcony.
Yep. And what was that? There was a corner I remember you mentioned. You were like,
I think it was
it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was 10th Avenue and 58th Street or something.
There we go. Yeah.
And it can fool you for a moment, but if you realize how many times they're using that exact angle, you're like, this is a set.
Right. You need the real McCoy. And Owen Roizman is one of the guys, I think, who really got New York City in its full effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Emilio, I feel like at least of our main hosts, I think you may be the one of us that has the most kind of technical knowledge when it comes to film, because you studied film. And I would just want to ask you if you can give a quick minute or so on what does a cinematographer do?
So when it comes to cinematography, you're definitely thinking about composition, you're thinking about lighting, and you're also thinking about camera movement. And the thing that I think is important to know about cinematographers too is that their job is not one that is just limited to being there on set. A cinematographer is somebody who is in close contact with the director, with the writer, oftentimes production designers, costume designers, because they are really interested in figuring out what kind of color scheme there might be. They're going to need to know about locations and how a movie is supposed to look with whatever constraints that location might have. They're also on set most often, and they also are part of the post-production process because developing the actual film into a negative is something that they're also intimately involved with. So a cinematographer is honestly one of the maybe 3 or 4 most important jobs on a film.
Yeah.
So Owen Roizman, if you see his name as a cinematographer or director of photography, he's had a pretty big handprint on whatever you're going to watch.
Totally. And are those two jobs different at all? Like, is director of photography different?
That is a great question. They are often interchangeable terms. There are instances where a cinematographer and a director of photography might be a little bit different. I've heard that on big productions where there is a lot of B-roll that has to get filmed, or there's like second units, that a director of photography can sometimes be different than a cinematographer. But in many cases, a director of photography is oftentimes the cinematographer, or also linked. Their jobs are very similar.
Okay. Yeah, I see on IMDb he's mostly credited there as director of photography.
Right.
Including on these 3 movies.
Yeah, and I feel like we've set the stage well to get into the first movie we're going to discuss for this episode, which is Owen Roizman's breakthrough movie, without a doubt, The French Connection, which, before we get too deep into this, is not to be confused with other titles such as The French Dispatch.
Of course.
Which is the Wes Anderson movie from a few years ago.
Is it really a few years ago? I'm like, last summer. I have no sense of time.
It's 2021, but I mean, that's appropriate because I think that movie...
Post-pandemic.
The time that it came out, I think, robbed that movie of a fair chance at the box office. I feel like it deserves to be revisited.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. This movie is also not to be confused with The Rainbow Connection, the song from The Muppets.
Oh, love that song.
I would really love a parody of that.
Sung by Popeye Doyle?
Exactly.
I feel like he wouldn't have a good sense of melody.
I don't think so. Yeah. I think it's also important to know that The French Connection is not to be confused with The French Connection 2, which actually takes place predominantly in France. I've never seen this movie. Have you seen this movie, Brendan?
I have, and it's an unfortunate dud because the pedigree seems like it could be decent. It's John Frankenheimer. It's like there's reasons why you'd want to watch it too. Like when you come to the end of this film, you're like, I would like to know more.
Let's fire it up. Let's do it again. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that it just doesn't come together.
Yeah.
And so, yes, don't confuse it with that one.
Definitely don't. I also, just before we move off on that, I'm trying to think, is that the first movie sequel that got like a 2 right after it? Not like a part 2, but
just
a 2.
A number 2.
What year did The French Connection 2 come out?
I think it was 1975. And I was trying to think because In the Heat of the Night got They Call Me Mr. Tibbs.
Right.
But that's a totally different title.
Totally.
I think this might be a trailblazer for that reason.
That's a good trivia question.
Yeah.
Suss that out.
Anyway, let's let that all simmer.
If you can think of a 2
Let us know.
before
Email
1975, please email us.
While we're still on this, The French Connection is also not to be confused with The Cowboy and the Frenchman, which you may not know by name, but that is a short film from the mid-1980s directed by David Lynch.
Ooh.
Notably, his first collaboration with frequent collaborator Harry Dean Stanton.
Oh, yes.
Made between Blue Velvet and the beginning of Twin Peaks.
Which I just have to say, Sal Boca in this movie, occasionally in profile, I think looks like Harry Dean Stanton. Occasionally just in profile.
I can see that.
Yeah, Tony LoBianco's the actor.
Yeah.
I feel like we have cleared the space enough to not confuse the French Connection with any of these other things.
I think it's a good thing that you pointed it out, though, because a friend of mine did go to watch The French Connection on Amazon, and he just like quickly went and rented it. And he rented The French Dispatch.
Oh my God. See, we are doing God's work here.
Yeah. But yes, we're talking about the 1971 film starring Gene Hackman, directed by William Friedkin. So what is this film about?
Well, I will say we're going to start with Christmas in New York. I love Christmas. It's Christmas in New York in the 1970s, and jolly old St. Nick is ringing his bell on a street corner in Harlem. But this is no ordinary Salvation Army Santa Claus. It is an undercover cop, Jimmy Popeye Doyle, and his nearby partner, Buddy Cloudy Russo. The two narcotics detectives are infamous around New York, and they're about to get a lead on their biggest score yet. Late that night at the Copacabana, the partners spy a gang of drug mobsters, seemingly in the middle of a celebration. They tail one of the men, Sal Boca, back to his home in Brooklyn and are soon able to establish a link between him and Joel Weinstock, a bigwig buyer in the underground drug trade. What the two detectives don't yet know is that a massive shipment of heroin is making its way across the Atlantic, originating from French kingpin Alain Charnier. Over the next week, Popeye will continue to follow his hunches in an unfaltering obsession to uncover the truth, find the drugs, and take Charnier down. That's the French Connection.
Well said. What personal histories do we have with it? Who here has seen it before? For whom is it new?
Oh, I've seen it many, many times. There's only one of these three movies is a movie that has like been with me through my whole life, and this is not one of them. I think I came to the French Connection probably when I was like 22, 23. Like one of those things where it's like, oh, now's the time. I gotta watch this. Like DVD Netflix when they would get sent to your house and you could like have like 3 at a time. I think that was like when I watched like the most movies in my life.
Yeah. It's just the convenience factor.
Oh yeah, and I would just like make a little film school stack for myself. So definitely the French Connection was one I had seen then. I've seen it multiple times since. Also in the theater here in New York, like on a 35 millimeter print that was pretty grimy, and it actually really helped enhance the film. and also like I feel like as a New Yorker, I always knew about it, like driving under elevated tracks. People would make reference to it. It's like, oh, this feels like the French Connection. And it was like the same for me as like Saturday Night Fever. Like I never saw it when I was a kid, but I just always knew it. I knew it existed. Yeah. I knew that there was a sense of like corruption and like this is what New York was like in the 70s. And so it is a movie. It was not a movie that was a surprise to me when I did see it. I felt like I had already picked up a lot of pieces of it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Whereas for me, I think that it certainly existed in my mind a similar way before I saw it, but I saw it much younger. I saw it for the first time at 14. And that was in the midst of a phase in my life where, call it bizarre, but I kind of had a obsession with crime dramas for whatever reason. I don't know why. But that was like 14. That was the age when I first saw this. I first saw the first two Godfathers at that age, and then also like Goodfellas, The Untouchables. And coming back to the French Connection years later, I notice a lot more now, but I think that the sheer New Yorkness of it really left an impression on me. And I mean, when you watch that chase sequence, like, how could that not be burned into your brain?
Oh, yeah, totally. How about you, Madeline?
I had so little knowledge of this film. I came in kind of the exact opposite of Brendan in every way, where I knew nothing about this. I think that in general, 70s crime dramas are not a genre that I find myself gravitating towards naturally. I generally enjoy watching them when I put them on, but I often am not making the choice for myself. So I really knew almost zero about this movie. I don't even know that until you guys brought it up for this cycle, I knew it was set in New York. I knew nothing about
Did you
this.
think it was set in France?
I mean, I think that's a fair assumption.
Well, partially it is.
But I think I knew that Gene Hackman was in it. That's
cool.
probably the extent of my knowledge.
Very cool. I saw this movie at least 20 years ago, if not more. I knew that it was an important movie. I had already seen Gene Hackman in a number of things. But if you don't count Young Frankenstein, I hadn't really seen him in anything yet where he wasn't like the elder statesman. This was my first time seeing like younger, virile, not bald Gene Hackman on screen kicking ass and doing stuff. I remember liking it then. I have to say I had not seen it since. This is my first time revisiting it. The French Connection is awesome. It's just like such a visceral experience. I love how it just drops you in. You're like the third guy in the crew, you know? I also love all the locations. Like everything looks so sumptuous. Like when you're in France, it just looks beautiful. Like obviously we've talked about New York looking great in this, but like even that moment when they're in Washington, DC, and it just looks awesome.
Yeah, and William Friedkin said on the director commentary that there were no sound stages. It was all on location. And I mean, you can certainly tell. And so that's where having Owen Roizman with his documentary pedigree was a really crucial move for making this movie what it was. And then when you think about not using any sound stages, all on location, and see some of what's going on in that movie, you instantly think, good God, how did they do that?
Yeah.
You could answer that question kind of like how John Ford answered Peter Bogdanovich when he asked, how did you shoot that? With a camera. This movie, The French Connection, and we'll get into this more with Pelham 123 when we get there, but there's a lot of contrasts in The French Connection. Blue collar and white collar, native New Yorkers and foreign visitors, and then, of course, law enforcement versus crime. And so how do we think that Owen Roizman's cinematography in this film helps to establish these contrasts, and what greater conclusions do you think can be drawn from both the imagery and just these general themes they serve?
I'm going to answer your question by getting kind of technical here. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole trying to understand a little bit about what makes Owen Roizman and the look of these films what they are. So I found out that Owen Roizman, he shot The French Connection using Arriflex 35 2C cameras. Now, this is the camera choice of Stanley Kubrick for A Clockwork Orange. And this is something that Stanley Kubrick pretty much used exclusively, I think, until Eyes Wide Shut. But he absolutely loved this camera. Spielberg also loved to use this camera. He used it to shoot Sugarland Express and Raiders of the Lost Ark. You also see it used with Fellini's 8.5, Easy Rider, the Parallax View. It's a camera that's renowned for being lightweight and portable. And by the 1970s, when Roizman was using it to shoot The French Connection, it was also pretty quiet and could be made almost totally soundproof, actually, if by putting it in like a special case that Arriflex sold. So there was very little disruption when it came to recording sound and dialogue on location.
Yeah, it does seem like with this movie being so on the streets that would be really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this camera, I think, really allows you to move with actors, like come in and out of scenes. And I think that's something, to your question there, Julian, I think that's something this movie just does in spades. It's just the camera is always following its actors places.
Yeah, I mean, following the actor is certainly an apt way to put it. There's a very like shaky cam, handheld kind of thing going on for much of the movie. But there's a few moments too where watching it, you might be fooled to think that there's dolly track there. There isn't.
Yeah.
There would just be camera operator. I think his name was Ricky Bravo.
Enrique Bravo.
In a wheelchair. So like when you get like that tracking shot, which is kind of a pun because it's in a train station, that tracking shot of Charnier walking down the Grand Central platform, that's done in a wheelchair.
And also like at the very beginning when they're first chasing like the first guy that they're trying to arrest, when they're chasing him, he is sprinting.
Yeah.
It made me think of Run Lola Run. How they do have to, I think they're like in a car going down the street like next to her running.
A little bit of Francis Ha, I think, too.
Yeah.
I want to tie it back to other movies we talked about.
Oh, this is such the antithesis of Francis Ha.
That's very true.
Yeah, so then like that's where, you know, if you're not informed on the lack of equipment they were using, it could fool you. I feel like this is the cinematography equivalent of guerrilla warfare. It's really about knowing the environment and the land that you're on and working with that.
Yeah. But when you're talking about contrast, obviously the car chase scene in this is just incredible.
Yeah.
And that's also contrasted because, you know, the guy, the sniper, you know, the hitman, he's above ground. He's on the elevated train, but you have Popeye who's on the street the whole time. And I think my favorite shot in the whole movie is when it's actually parallel with the car and the train moving at the same time.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like when you watch it, it's like the right combination of like kind of sickening and just amazing.
Like breathtaking though.
Yeah.
Like it's so cool from a technical perspective. Like I love it too because you get it from a couple of different angles. You get it from right below.
Oh
like
yeah,
from
you
the
see it from below first.
and then you see it from the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of like the scene you described, the running,
Yeah.
it's sort of like that, kind of following it in profile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll kind of keep this at a minimum because I could probably do this a lot with this movie. But like one of the great episodes we got to do of our show was with William Friedkin.
Yeah.
And that was about 10 years ago. And like I just cherish it as a artifact, right? And he talks about that scene in particular a lot and how he has regrets about how basically reckless and lawless they were in shooting it.
Yeah.
And what it makes me think about as we're talking about Roizman here is that, like, as was said, this was a worker. This was a guy who basically showed up to do a job. And this is like an early job for him. And I think like it's almost like improv comedy, right? Where there's that like rule of like, you know, just don't think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was what was at stake here for these guys. They were like, don't think about it, just do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot. Like, so obviously, you're coming to this with your craft in place. You're, you know, ready to do the work. But I think so much of it was just improv too. Was just trying and listening to Friedkin talk about it. He always knew what he wanted done, how he wanted it to look, and then it was just everybody else's job to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right,
And
right.
they were
Catch
going to
up.
figure it out fast and on the move because, in particular, with a scene like this, they probably weren't fully permitted and they didn't have all the guidelines that you're supposed to take into place when you're doing a dangerous scene like this. They just relied on the fact that, like, they were working with cops and the cops could, like, keep people at bay.
Yeah, clear
Yeah.
path for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so all of that, it's not so much that says much about the like contrasts in the movie, but it does to me say something about contrast between this and other movies.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I like that.
think like, you know, we're going to keep coming back to this idea that it has a similarity to documentary film and guerrilla filmmaking, like you said. And I think that this is just like also a kind of early version of like stunt shooting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so like all these things kind of mingle together and wind up making this full package of a type of thing, a visual thing that you didn't have a necessary vocabulary for at the time when this happened. It's these movies that created that vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
watch this scene, and I think this isn't possible. Like, some of the car stunts that they do, it just doesn't feel like something you could do on the streets of New York at any point.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that Gene Hackman seems like he's doing a fair amount of the driving.
Yeah.
He does that one like peel out and he gets right out of the car. There's no cutaway.
Right.
And I'm like, he just did that.
Yeah, there's like giant poles that you could have hit at any time.
I
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
No, I think he does a lot of the driving because one of the other, I forget which other actor it was they considered who they ended up having to not cast because he didn't have a driver's license.
Ah,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Could that have
How
been
could you be in
Jimmy Breslin?
It might
I
have been
think.
Jimmy Breslin,
Yeah.
who was also not an actor. Who was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a newspaper columnist.
Yeah, who I think was fired because he was an alcoholic.
Alcoholism,
Yeah. Yeah. And when you listen to like William Friedkin talk about that, I mean, like he's the kind of person I'd listen to him read the dictionary.
Yeah.
He's got a very lively way of speaking. And, you know, when he just talks about meeting and firing Jimmy Breslin, there's just the right mix of like reverence for the guy and also like, fuck it, I had to do my job.
Yeah. Yeah, he initially wanted Jackie Gleason for the part.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard that. Yeah.
And then Peter Boyle, because Peter Boyle just made Joe, so he was like a commodity at the time. And then Jimmy Breslin was like his third choice, and one he really wanted to like go to the mat for, and it didn't work out.
Didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also heard that he was pretty mean to Gene Hackman.
Yeah, I heard
Like,
this.
yeah, like he
Hackman
would
almost quit.
Yeah, like I think he did quit a couple times and there was negotiations
was
with
like,
the agents. Yeah, like come on. I think the agent even said something like, okay, fine, but then you can own the movie because you have to pay for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. But yeah, and apparently like he would just get him riled up to get that just
The
like
rage. Yeah.
like that anger
Yeah.
that he just is
Well, because
operating with the whole time.
He said that Gene Hackman, in his core, was a guy. Where he grew up was somewhere where the KKK was very prevalent, and he was very like anti any forms of bigotry and So for that to be such an essential part of Popeye Doyle's character,
the bigotry.
Yes, he didn't want to say some of the lines. He didn't want to, he was argued with him on a lot of stuff. And what Friedkin felt was he got to know him a little bit before making the movie, and he learned that he had a very difficult relationship. Hackman did a very difficult relationship with his own father, and Friedkin was I'm gonna be that dad to him. I'm gonna do that stuff and get that out of him. And he said, Hackman eventually came to understand it, and I think on the DVD, he's interviewed and says like, I credit Billy for getting me there to that place. I didn't like it at the time,
right?
But.
Yeah.
We will probably bring up A Face in the Crowd a little bit later, but that's another similarity I think from the making of that film.
Yeah,
that Elia Kazan was borderline abusive to Andy Griffith to try to get the performance out of him, but similarly, Andy Griffith was like, you know what? The guy did what he had to do. Sort of like what you said, I got to make this movie, we got to do it by any means necessary.
Yeah. And someone else, when we're talking about, Emilio, in that episode on A Face in the Crowd, you called Kazan a method director.
Right. Yeah.
And someone else who I thought about a lot while watching The French Connection, someone who I have no doubt was influenced by it, is Michael Mann.
Totally. Yeah. I felt that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, Heat is incredibly indebted to The French Connection. But I also, from what I've heard about Michael Mann, I feel like you could call him a method director too, but less in the sense, like, I don't know any stories about him being like actively hostile to actors in that way you described, but maybe more like just researching down, to put it in a term that Robert Shaw uses in Pelham 1, 2, 3 to the letter, before he makes his films. Like, I think there's something like that. He was working with cabbies for months before he even started shooting Collateral, stuff like that.
Right.
Like when thinking about like Heat in comparison to The French Connection, that's another movie where it's just all about the symbiotic relationship of law enforcement and a criminal.
That's
too.
true.
And I feel like The French Connection is kind of the movie in my mind that codifies that type of movie.
Yeah.
I feel like there's things in this, and you can credit a lot of it to Owen Roizman too. Movies that came after, such as like Die Hard or Speed, would not be what they are without some things from The French Connection.
Totally.
Or Pelham 1, 2, 3 for that matter.
Man, Speed and Pelham 1, 2, 3 are like so connected.
They're so. I felt that way too. Actually, watching that. Yeah. Actually, Speed and French Connection have that moment where the like protagonist
almost
like
runs on a baby carriage.
Yeah, my man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of like, it's just cans.
Yeah. I actually, of those two, Speed was the movie I saw first. So then when I saw that moment in The French Connection, I was like, oh, this is where they get that from.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to jump back in really quick. So we talked about the Airflex cameras that were very portable. You can move around. French Connection was also shot using Kodak Eastman film stock 52-54, which you can also see in a bunch of other classic films. Taxi Driver was shot using this film stock. Chinatown, The Godfather, and Barry Lyndon, which famously was shot using a lot of natural lighting. And this brings up a huge point in this, which is that this is a film stock that was known for getting desirable results when you could, quote, push or, quote, force the film. In essence, what that means is that you could film with less light than what was recommended and underexpose the image on the celluloid. And then when the film was developed, you could overexpose it and get this like rich, creamy look that had a lot of contrast and actually get back, quote unquote, like some of the lighting that you might have not had to begin with, but in this visually compelling way.
I bet you that like a point where you would notice that in the movie is like when they're staking out the club, first of all, when he's waiting outside for the mobsters to all come out.
Right.
And it's this like you just see blackness behind him, but
Yeah.
they're able to pull him out into
Right.
the light, even though there's generally no lighting around him there.
Yeah, you have these multiple stakeouts that are in the middle of the night, just like pitch black.
Yeah. I also think about that scene when he goes to that bar and just shakes down everybody and goes to
the
that back room.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so little light in there and it's so tight. You turn and he's completely out of focus even. We'll get more into the focusing a little bit later, but those kinds of shots you really couldn't do as effectively until I think this film stock was developed. From what I've read, like this forcing, Roizman wasn't the one who figured it out, but I think this movie is one of the shining examples and early examples that I think a lot of people tried to emulate.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
scene you're talking about in the bar, it goes back to how compact this camera is, because
Totally.
this feels like such a tight space.
Yeah.
And they have so many background actors and so many actors just throughout, like crammed in here.
Yeah, yeah.
So you definitely need to be able to, be tight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then by contrast, and this is part of why I thought of that word
No pun
earlier.
intended.
No, pun intended.
Pun intended.
I love puns.
Julian doesn't like no pun intended.
Oh,
He
that's
thinks
right.
all
We've
puns are
established that,
intended.
Yeah. No, all puns from me are intentional. But there are also some extremely bright scenes in The French Connection, too. I mean,
Yeah.
I first think of those scenes in Marseille at the beginning of the movie. And that's something, as we've talked about all these New York movies, like that's another theme that comes up is the time spent outside of New York, too.
Yeah.
Whether in Francis Ha, it's in Paris, in Honora, it's in Las Vegas, in The French Connection, it's in, France.
Yeah.
But some of those scenes in Marseille, too, really do establish some of the greater contrasts of that movie, especially as they're there to establish Charnier as this really this high culture individual that he is. And that, that's the only time you see anyone in a literal castle in the movie. A ruin, but a castle nonetheless. But then even as it goes back to New York, I mean, that whole iconic chase sequence happens in broad daylight too.
Yeah. And even when he's pursuing him on foot before that, or when he's pursuing Charnier, when Charnier's like trying to evade the various detectives, like I think there's maybe somewhere in Midtown.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Right,
that's
right.
also just like in the middle of the daylight.
Yeah, I think that Friedkin called it on the commentary the triangular surveillance sequence.
Yes. Yeah. That's good.
Which has some just great shots all like throughout its whole runtime. There's one of my favorites in the whole movie where you see it's not Charnier, but it's Sal Boca is walking down the street, and you see one of the cops behind him in a black trench coat, and then the camera, it must be on a crane. It kind of like it's at a high angle and it pans, and you can see that Popeye Doyle and another cop are across the street in the same kinds of trench coats.
Yeah.
Connected to the same sequence. One of my other favorite shots in the whole movie, and again, something that put this idea of contrast in my head, is this one that takes place from inside of the restaurant where Charnier and some of his accomplices are eating.
Oh yeah.
And
they're,
there's a
eating
zoom.
French food.
They're eating French food, and they're just all comfortable in this well-lit room. And there's a zoom that happens to reveal Popeye across the street,
Love it.
freezing
Yeah.
his ass off.
And,
Yeah.
And
Very
even he takes a sip of his coffee,
Yeah.
and it's disgusting, and he pours it out on the sidewalk,
Yeah.
and then it goes back into the restaurant, and they're pouring Charnier a
Yeah.
nice, warm, hot cup of coffee.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And that, the zoom lens being used, I mean, Emilio, you mentioned a few Kubrick movies, and when you think about when The French Connection comes out in 1971, I mean, there's two other movies that come out in that same year that both have very memorable uses of zooms, which are McCabe and Mrs. Miller
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and
definitely.
A Clockwork Orange. And so this is like, I mean, I'm sure there's others from that year that I am not thinking of now, but this is like the year of the zoom in that way. But that's something that really, for me, places The French Connection in its time. It shows what's innovative about the movie and also shows what's so ingenious about Roizman himself.
Yeah.
Are there any scenes or moments that we want to shout out? Any kind of notable moments that we just want to bring up?
Something I've got to point out, especially for my fellow denizens of the Bushwick and Ridgewood area, is that there's a famous exterior in this movie of Sal and Angie's convenience store.
Oh yeah.
Which
I was
is-
wondering where exactly that was.
Yeah, so that is on Wyckoff Avenue between Hart and Sidham Streets, and it is now some pretty popular locations in their own right. There's a restaurant called Mesa Azteca right there.
Oh yeah. I've been
And
there.
on the other side, fittingly the left-hand side of it, there's a popular bar called Left Hand Path.
Oh yeah.
And I knew these places well before I realized that, wait, that's the French Connection storefront
Oh,
right
cool.
there. And
yeah, I saw the Sidham sign, and then I couldn't see where else they were, so I'm glad you pointed it
yeah,
out.
there's a big Key Food across the street from that now, which I think is just some unused husk of a building when you see it in the French Connection.
Yeah.
That's, there's a lot of great on location things in this movie. That's one of my personal favorites for, I think, now obvious reasons.
Ridgewood represent.
Well, it's Bushwick
That was
technically,
Bushwick,
but
yeah.
Sorry.
that general area
Sorry.
represent.
You can
Yeah.
cut that.
We were kind of approaching the Charnier Grand Central scene.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
where he
yeah.
and Popeye just continue to kind of evade each other. And I think the very end of that, where Charnier just like slips back into the train, is the funniest moment of the
Oh
whole
yeah.
movie.
It's
Yeah.
quite good. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good use, and along with the shot I mentioned earlier with the zoom. I mean, I think that's something that will come up with some of the other movies we're going to discuss here. Is I think that Owen Roizman shot some really great scenes using windows. Of course, that moment with Charnier happens through a window in The French Connection.
The little wave.
Yes, the little wave that Popeye repeats
back, yeah.
at the end of the movie. But yeah, this will come up more with some of the later things, but that's an early example of that too. Yeah. And one more thing about this cinematography is just that when I think of the end of The French Connection, I can't not think of the final climactic sequence in The Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of just
you're talking about like the fact that someone's kind of running and shooting at air, maybe
the grimy interiors,
right.
And when I think about The French Connection as a Best Picture winner and other things I'd compare it to, that's honestly one of them. The other one I'd think of is actually, this may sound a little bit like a stretch at first, but The Hurt Locker.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
That's interesting that you say that.
Yeah,
go ahead, continue, because I got something to follow that up with.
Oh, yeah.
Well, my rationale for that is that The Hurt Locker is another very much on location movie, and the other thing is that I think that the way that movie treats war is much like how The French Connection treats police work, as an obsessive addiction.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that what you were going to say, Brendan?
Well, yes, but from a different movie, but interestingly directed by the same person.
Oh.
So I had this weird feeling. And it really kind of came to me during that scene when they're at the Copacabana.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, who is he what's the character he is reminding me of here? He meaning Popeye. Mm-hmm. And it was really kind of keying in. And Roizman's work in this scene is really great too, because
so good.
It's almost like this smoldering, like, hellscape for him, for Popeye. you really get, because it's the colors of the club are on his face and everything, and so it's like you're in his psyche in this moment, and if you, especially if you've seen the movie before, like, you realize, like, this is all this guy's life is. His life is
he's like
this
wants to find people.
Obsession, right? Yeah. And I realized it reminded me of Zero Dark 30 in the sense that you have this, like, radicalized law enforcer who cannot be swayed from their path, who has no other life other than this one mission, who will compromise morality, who will do things that we will look at in hindsight as wrong, as the improper way to prosecute that crime. And they are yet undeterred and will get to a place at the end, one kind of in a personal way, in a way of, like, self-destruction, and one being Popeye, where he's just going to continue to destroy other people. We don't know who he's shooting at the end of that film. It could be anybody he's putting a bullet into.
Yeah.
And so, like, it was an odd thing that it came to me that way, but I felt like it was appropriate.
What you're describing also reminds me a lot of Sicario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's sort of that slow burn of realizing who this movie is really about.
Yeah.
And it's about very similar themes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the making of The French Connection, I mean, I think that, well, like the cops, the real life cops who inspired the movie, Eddie Egan and Sonny Grasso, they were on set the whole time.
Yeah.
And based on, like, some bonus material that it was on the DVD, it's also on YouTube and you can watch it. I think it's called Untold Stories of The French Connection. Like, based on some of that material, it seems like they went into this movie thinking they really would paint a positive portrait of them. But I think that, Friedkin wisely made a lot of room for the nuances of the story, even though I think that those guys in real life were not unproud of what they saw in the movie, interestingly. So it's, I mean, I think it is, to everything that's just been said, it really is the prototypical, like, addiction, obsession in work that is immoral sort of movie.
Well, and that also, that fine line of who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
Yes. Right. He's the anti-hero.
Like, this guy could very easily be a criminal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like all of his sublimated issues, whether it's the rage issues or the alcoholism or whatever womanizing he's doing, it's like these are all just things that that psychopaths do too, to like deal with the unsettledness within themselves and have to commit these acts. And his is all channeled into this ever-present, all-encompassing obsession of crime work.
Yeah.
Reminds me a lot of Heat, right? The Al Pacino character in that too. I was going to ask you guys, have you guys seen 48 Hours?
I have not.
Okay, cool. So that scene where he gets that scoop from his informant reminded me so much of that scene in 48 Hours, the star-making scene in that movie where Eddie Murphy, his character, impersonates a cop. Like the Nick Nolte character says, he's like, do you think you can really go in there and get the information we need? He's like, I can. He's like, all right, you take my badge, you go in. And considering the influence that the French Connection had on crime films, I have to imagine that this scene was on the minds of Walter Hill and the filmmakers of 48 Hours, because there's a very clear role reversal. Like that scene in The French Connection is honestly kind of hard to watch.
Yeah,
you know? And in 48 Hours, it's the exact flip. It's Eddie Murphy goes into this bar full of honky-tonk white guys and is like, I'm the big dick in this room. Like, I'm the person that is going to boss everybody around and tell you how it is. And you get like a whole decade of movies that are influenced, I think, by The French Connection and this type of like white cop harassing minorities. And then in 1982 with 48 Hours, you get this response.
Well, I think, because you're also dealing with then, as all of these movies always have, are like knockoff imitators. And, you know, throughout the rest of the 70s, so much of that like kind of vigilante justice stuff becomes very popular.
Right.
It's using the tropes of Dirty Harry and of this. And it's like the racism in French Connection, I think, is like super important to the story and to the characters.
Right.
Whereas there's plenty of like, you know, you just flat out call them like exploitation films where like the racism becomes like the fun of the movie. Right.
Right.
And it's like, and I think that absolutely like Eddie's arrival into moviedom was like a rebuke of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think through the filter of a scene like this one.
Yeah, I can't not think of The Wire too, like 30 years after The French Connection, even though it's set in Baltimore. It's, you know, there's just all these things about Popeye Doyle where I immediately think of Jimmy McNulty, the main character of that show.
Oh, totally.
Too. But that also being a show that comes like from a white creator and with a white lead actor, but that otherwise the representation is mostly of black characters, that it shows some really unsavory realities, but I think that it's praised for being honest as opposed to being something that is just kind of
exploitative,
airbrushed.
Oh, the honesty is one of the great things from The French Connection that I remember. I think there's a documentary called A Decade Under the Influence. It's by Ted Demme and Richard LaGravenese.
Definitely heard of this. I've not seen it.
I think I remember it so well because they used to air it on the IFC channel. So it would be, and it was like in 3 parts. So you could like, you just wound up being on all the time. And I remember there's a clip of Roy Scheider talking about seeing The French Connection in a theater uptown, and it was a predominantly black audience. And at the scene, you know, when they're leaving the police station, and you know, he's got his hand has been sliced by the perp, and Popeye uses the N-word about the guy, and it mostly to say never trust one, right?
Yeah.
And the audience like laughed and applauded and went like, and like Roy Scheider said he could feel the appreciation from the audience of being like, we knew it.
Yeah.
That's how they talk.
Yeah.
We've told you that's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel like we've done a great job discussing The French Connection. And are we feeling ready to move on to Pelham?
Totally.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Yeah. They'll still be picking their feet in Poughkeepsie. But we are now going to board a downtown 6 train, so to speak, and discuss The Taking of Pelham 123, which, given that it is a crime thriller released in 1974, depicting a hostage situation contingent on transportation. This is not to be confused with the Sugarland Express.
Oh, good one.
Steven Spielberg movie from the same year, his first theatrical release, followed shortly after by Jaws. I saw that for the first time just a few months ago. Holds up. It's an interesting entry in the Spielberg filmography. Has anyone else here seen that?
You know what? I've seen bits of it. I've not seen the whole thing.
I remember watching it on TV when I was younger, and I would have to revisit it.
Yeah.
But yeah, not to be confused with The Taking of Pelham 123.
Very cool. I should say that it should not be confused with another New York City movie, a more recent one that stars Denzel Washington intimately involved in a hostage situation, which we might get back to in a second here. Also, I think, an unassailably great film, Inside Man, the Spike Lee film from 2006 about a hostage situation, but this time at a bank in Lower Manhattan and all of the hubbub that ensues. not
Yeah.
to be confused.
I have
with
not
film.
seen that movie yet. Heard great things about it.
It's just
Easy
like
rewatch.
It's so good. Yeah, it's an easy rewatch. Yeah.
And speaking of Denzel and hostage situations, of course, this
Yeah.
movie is not to be confused with the 2009 remake, which I haven't seen and I don't plan to. Has anyone seen the remake of this movie?
Yeah, no, do not do it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll
Yeah.
get into this a little bit later, but I think tonally it's very different, and I think it loses it.
Yeah, misses the mark.
It
big
really
time.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say you should also not confuse this with the 1998 made-for-TV movie
Right.
with
Yeah.
Edward James Olmos and I believe it's Vincent D'Onofrio.
Oh, interesting.
In the Mr.
Mr. Blue, Gray,
Green.
Gray?
Yeah.
Mr. Green?
I get
Mr.
the
Green.
colors mixed.
He's
up.
the
Yeah.
sniffler. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I could see almost. He looks a little similar to Martin Balsam. I could kind of see him in that role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, we are not talking about any of those other things. Instead, we're talking about the OG movie of The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. I say OG movie because it was a book beforehand. This is an adaptation. And so, in this film, on one seemingly ordinary afternoon in Manhattan, a group of 4 men dressed in matching disguises board a lower Manhattan-bound 6 train that has departed from Pelham Bay Park at 1:23 p.m., before holding the train's motorman and conductor at gunpoint and thus hijacking the train. Once in control, they stop the entire train between 28th and 23rd Streets, disconnect the front car from those behind it, and order the motorman to guide all passengers from the back cars away while holding the 18 front car passengers hostage. Noticing that the train has been halted mid-route, the dispatch team at Grand Central Tower and the transit police radio into the train and are responded to by the head bandit, codenamed Mr. Blue, who demands a $1 million ransom be paid in 1 hour's time and threatens to kill 1 passenger per minute if this demand is not met. Led by crusty but benign Lieutenant Zachary Garber, an effort to scrounge together the money ensues, quickly reaching the mayor's office and mobilizing much of the city's police force along the way. Throughout this jam-packed afternoon, Garber generally keeps his cool as he helps direct the passage of the money through numerous hitches along the way, many coming from those color-coded bandits, one being particularly trigger-happy, while another audibly fights a cold. Severe accidents occur, and the results are undeniably traumatizing for everyone involved. But for many, when all is said and done, the story ends up being another great demonstration of the resilience that defines true New Yorkers.
That's it.
Yeah, sounds pretty
That's the
good.
movie.
I think you did it.
And we'll get into some more specific details as we discuss it, but that's the setup.
Yeah, and you started our conversation by telling us a little bit about your personal history of the film.
Yes, what I think I did not mention when describing that screening earlier is that it was on some really crisp 35 millimeter, which it's pristine when it's not pristine, if you know what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
Totally.
You were mentioning your French Connection 35
Exactly.
millimeter
Yeah.
experience.
You
Yeah.
like seeing those scratches.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Cigarette burns, all that stuff. Yeah.
And when you see a movie of like New York at this time in 35 millimeter, and you see like some of the storefront exteriors that exist there, you see some of those shops, and you can almost taste the pizza that they're serving. Like in particular, that scene, like the high speed car ride that happens in the middle of Pelham 1, 2, 3, where they stop for a moment at Spring Street, and there's you can see some of those storefronts right there that just look absolutely perfect on 35 millimeter. But enough about my history with the movie. What about everyone else here?
Well, so this is a movie that's kind of been with me my whole life. Actually, it's not so much that the movie's been with me my whole life, but as early as I can remember, like having conscious thought, one of the things that I was kind of fascinated with was my father's bookshelf. And
I got you, yeah.
And
yeah.
it was just like I knew all these things were like someday they would be mine. Like I would be able to access them. And they were like, it was like a lot of Stephen King books or, Shogun. And I couldn't even read yet. I would just look at the covers of these things, and I would know what the titles were because, it's like how you memorize like your records when you're a little kid.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I remembered this book with a subway on the front, and it had a long title with numbers, and so like I was always kind of fascinated with it. And I remember my dad saying, "Oh, that's a good book," or whatever. And then it was like on TV. By the time we had a VHS player, my dad recorded it off the TV, so we had like a bowdlerized version that I watched as a kid because it was edited like there was violence in it. I remember knowing that conductor got killed.
Right.
But like it wasn't bloody and they got rid of the vulgarities and that. So it was like, it probably still wasn't appropriate for me to watch, but I definitely will remember watching it. I like remember it very well.
Totally.
And so because of that, it's been one of those movies that I show friends who have never seen it.
Yeah.
I will, go, as I mentioned, when I see it's playing at a screening somewhere near me, I will go see it because I know it's going to kill. It's going to be an awesome time, especially for first timers. Like you see it every time I'm there at a screening and somebody does a little introduction. They're like, anyone here seeing it for the first time? And it's like half the hands go up and like people who are in the theater who have seen it are like, ooh, like we're like excited that people are going to watch it for the first time. So it's a brisk, like, hour and 40. It never stops. It's like just this
great
like
pacing.
perpetual motion machine movie. It's like one of those great one day movies. Like I love those. So like there's just so much I love about this movie. I love that score.
Yeah.
the score's
And it's
great.
like minimally
Fantastic
used.
score.
It's not like music blasting throughout the whole movie, but it's perfectly used.
Yes.
And so there's all of this is just the benefits of like kind of growing up with it. I will say the other thing is, even though it's like from the mid 70s, it's still, for me, in like the early to mid 80s, felt like my New York. In a way, the French Connection does not. Like so much of that is like, way in the outer boroughs, right? Like outer parts of I guess it's where Brighton Beach or something.
Something like that.
And for me, as a kid who lived in we would call it a 2-zone area of the city, where you'd have to take 2 forms of mass transit to get somewhere, a bus to the subway, right?
Yeah.
So like we took a lot of public transit, and I was on the subways a lot, and on the subways going into Manhattan, and it's like it felt like what my New York was. All those buildings that they're in, like when they go into like the command center, and you just see like the water fountains and just like the hinges on the doors, and I remember those buildings. Like my dad was a civil servant. He worked in the government buildings. I would go to work with him. It looked like that still. Like there were no changes from the 70s to the 80s.
Right.
The city was still climbing out of an economic catastrophe. So like everything had to look that way for quite some time. So like this type of movie is like really near and dear to me because it just feels like my New York.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
I love that.
And incredibly, I think that command center in the movie was actually a set. I mean, which I had to like read about it to know that because it's very believable.
Very well designed.
If you go to the New York Transit Museum in downtown Brooklyn, they have a kind of replica command center in there. And I remember thinking like, oh, this looks just like the thing in Pelham 123.
Yeah, and that station where the Transit Museum is the one that's used for movies like this one whenever they have to film something that involves the subway.
And the Michael Jackson Bad video.
Right, yeah.
Good point. Good point. How about you, Madeline?
I hadn't seen this movie, so one of the things I like to do before I watch a new movie is to watch trailers from that year, just to really get myself in the mindset. So this is a trailer I watched, I think last year. I think when I watched Black Christmas, I watched this trailer.
I'm
possibly.
so glad you got around to that one.
Yes, that was great.
Yeah.
And so I remember watching this trailer within the last year and being like, man, I have got to get to this movie. And it was not long after that Julian, you had told me that you were going to go see it. So I was like, man, I really wish I could make that because I still, after I loved this, this was so much fun. Like you were talking about the pacing, it's just like propulsive the whole time. You're just on the edge of your seat. I really want to see this in the theater now. I had such a good time.
For sure. That's so cool. I saw this movie about 3 years ago. I definitely saw it on the Criterion channel. I'm like you guys. I love this movie straight away. And watching it again, for this conversation just cemented for me all those oddly delightful things about this movie. The first time I saw it, I was kind of surprised how humorous this movie is.
Oh, yeah. It's very
There's
funny.
like a lot of great humor in this movie.
I think Walter Matthau is so good at that particular style of humor.
Yeah, that frequency. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You were saying the resilience of the city. This feels like a weird, goofy love letter to the city, and specifically the idea of work. And jobs. This movie is all about like the responsibility of your job, how duty calls and like time doesn't stop, and the way that Mr. Green, even with his cold, has to show up to pull off his job. You see that happen time and time again with people, and it feels like a workplace comedy. I absolutely love it. I'm with you guys. This movie is a banger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to what you were just saying about the resilience of New Yorkers too, I think that it is like one of the best movies when it comes to depicting this kind of like the brusque but congenial spirit that really defines New York for many, many people. That this is a movie, I mean, when you consider what happens in it, I mean, it's this really scary thing that goes on, and yet somehow it's kind of an uplifting movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it really. Yeah.
But there's all these moments throughout it too that I think, of the bunch that we're discussing tonight, this is the movie that best depicts that New York trope of having something crazy going on around you and you just kind of nonchalantly carry on with life. I think in particular of like, there's this one scene near the end of the film where Mr. Green, who is at that point the one bandit who has, he's the lone survivor of the bunch, he just kind of casually walks out into Union Square through a subway grate and just walks away right before Zachary Garber walks right in the same grade. And that's the kind of thing where like the passersby, I know they would probably look at it, a little funny, but then just carry on with their life.
No one would have said, hey, a guy just came out of there.
Yeah. That makes me think of one train experience I had like a few years ago where I was on the M train and saw some guy like go out into the space between the cars and climb up on top of the train. And there were a couple of people around me looking around like, what's going on here? But then, this guy, like, there was no audible or visible sign of him getting hurt or anything. He must have gotten off somewhere. And no one, like, stopped what they were doing as that all was happening.
Yeah.
Well, that's that great moment on the train car when Mr. Blue pulls the gun for the first time and says, I need everyone's attention. And they laugh at him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And one of them stays asleep through the whole thing.
The whole thing.
And it's like, we're already at 42nd Street. I love that.
Yeah, and I was listening a little bit to, Jason Bailey, the film critic and author of the book Fun City Cinema, also did a podcast that led up to the release of that book, and he, of course, covered Pelham 123 on it. And there was a guest on his episode covering that. I forget exactly who, but someone was saying how, like, all of those hostage characters, it both feels like all of the types that you would write in, and yet it feels authentic still. It's like, the rare case where, like, what seems like the stereotype is truly accurate.
I mean, they literally are named in the credits, like
the
prostitute,
Yeah.
the homosexual. Like I was
The
like
hippie.
waiting for the credits. I wanted to watch them this time. I had no memory that that's how those characters were named. I was like, wait, what? They just called it. I didn't even know who they were talking about. Who was the
I'm like, which one is the
homosexual?
hippie?
Yeah.
I guess that was the woman doing the
the meditation.
Yeah, perhaps there's also like co-ed 1, co-ed 2.
Yeah. It's, if you're trying to find out exact names of actors, it's a little tricky with this movie. I mean, that conductor who I think, Brendan, you mentioned earlier, I thought the first time and since that, I think that he is a near dead ringer for Jeremy Allen White.
Oh, funny.
Oh,
yeah.
I totally saw that.
I felt
I
that
thought the same
too.
thing.
I didn't write it down in my notes, but yes.
Yeah, but I was like looking through the credits. I couldn't figure out which one was him. I don't think they just label him like the conductor easily like that.
That's interesting. He's like a probie, maybe.
Yeah, because he seems to be in training. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's a nice little touch. I always love that they're able to communicate to you very quickly the details of the train because there's a guy going through training to start.
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing with the command center and bringing the Tokyo subway representatives through.
Right.
You're able to dump all this exposition through a kind of clever means that also, for the majority of the people watching this movie who are not from New York, like have no idea about any of this. And as do a lot of New Yorkers, you know?
Yeah.
I also love too in that same interaction, the guy's like, dude, in 6 months, the motorist test or something. He's like, exactly. He's like, you don't want to stay here forever. And that to me is the workplace comedy element of this. Where you're like, just like any other day, I'm teaching you how it is, but I'm also letting you know you should look ahead a bit.
Work your way up.
Yeah.
So as we said, Owen Roizman is at the camera for all three of these movies, but they feel so decidedly different visually. So what do you guys feel like are the noticeable differences between this movie and how Roizman shoots The French Connection? Or we could even jump ahead a little bit to Network. Like, how do you think they are visually distinguished?
So I think that with Pelham 123, I think that in my mind, that is a more moment-to-moment frantic movie than it actually is. It's a pretty, I feel like calm is an overstatement, but it is a pretty like even keel movie at a lot of points, despite its subject matter.
Yeah, there's a lot of suspense.
Yeah.
But not always that much action.
Yeah, and I think, of course, when it gets to that climactic sequence of the train rolling seemingly nonstop down the tunnel, you see where Roizman's French Connection skills come firmly into play. But before that, I think there's a lot of really like slyly clever shots that happen that I think when you watch them the first time, you don't think much of them. But when you think about how on earth did they do that, then you start to think like, whoa, that was impressive. And I think in particular of all of the shots that take place inside the motorman's cab in the front of the car, because there's a few close-ups where you get, particularly of Robert Shaw as Mr. Blue and Martin Balsam as Mr. Green, where it's just like right up in their faces. And you think about that, you're like, you can't fit a camera in there.
Yeah. Emilio, do you know offhand what kind of camera they use?
I was looking it up. It would not shock me if it was another one of these Aeroflex cameras.
Yeah.
I couldn't confirm that, though.
But definitely something compact.
Yes, definitely something compact, for sure.
But I think the conventional wisdom is that whenever you see something in film that takes place in such a confined space, that it's safe to assume it was on a soundstage. Mm-hmm. And this is one moment where you're like, well, it can't have been. You can see the tunnel in the background. Mm-hmm. You could tell if it were a green screen too. So how did he do that?
A worse movie would have just built a set of a subway car.
Yeah.
One of the things that Roizman talks about in this interview in Masters of Light is that for a lot of his early films, he did what was called shooting wide open. When a cinematographer shoots wide open, they are allowing the most amount of light possible onto the actual celluloid. You get these lenses that have apertures that are really quick, f1.9s and f2s. One of the byproducts of this is that the focus is very shallow. And I actually think that this is a really cool effect. I think this goes back to this whole sort of 1970s aesthetic. Your character, if it's shot right, is in focus and very little else is. Mm-hmm. And I know that this happens a little bit in Pelham 1, 2, 3. I think this film was also shot with very little light in many cases.
Yeah.
I think this is something else that you're going to see with Roizman, at least with these two films, that there is this thing where your eye is naturally drawn, even when there's a lot of chaos. You, the viewer, kind of know where to look.
Totally.
Which I think is really cool. It's this like really weird, interesting byproduct of those constraints.
Interesting. Yeah. And when I think about like knowing where to look, immediately my mind goes to this series of shots that happen pretty early in the movie when like the hostage situation is still pretty new, where Mr. Blue and Mr. Green have kind of corralled everyone into one side of this train car. And then there's this kind of elliptical editing where like when you see Blue and Green, they're kind of like shown from a distance, like far down the train car to emphasize the empty seats around them, but your eyes still go straight to them. And then by contrast, when the rest of the passengers are shown, they're shown in very vivid close-ups for that moment. That's, there's another very amusing New York moment that happens in that same scene where there's like one character who's, I believe, the sex worker, who is just kind of like, here we go. It's a hostage situation. Yeah.
She's dealt with worse.
Yeah. And so that's one of those moments where it's like the camera is both dictating where you go and yet being kind of like a non-actor as well in that scene.
All these things you're saying about this, the way the camera kind of directs you through this movie, is this is a good place for me to go with this, because when you're asking about the differences between these three films, I noticed that The French Connection still has a very distinct Friedkin stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's because like I watched Sorcerer again recently.
Oh, so good.
And like it has those same like contrasts, right? Like they're in France at one point but they're elsewhere throughout the country. And then obviously the entirety of the jungle stuff. But then city stuff feels like the French, like there was literally a point where I had Scheider in my head in a scene that I thought I was going to be watching in The French Connection. I'm like, oh wait, no, that's from Sorcerer, right? As we talked about, there's like this sense that Roizman came to that movie as like a worker and was put to work, right? Like in the service of Billy Friedkin.
Yeah.
What is it? 3 years later, and he makes this Pelham 1, 2, 3. This feels like a movie that he composed. Now, maybe that's unfair of me because this director, Joseph Sargent, is kind of more of a journeyman.
Yeah.
And like he doesn't have a particular particularly distinct visual stamp, unless you want to include Jaws: The Revenge. But like the conscious thing that was going on with me through this movie was that so much of it was shot as frames. You're looking through these windows of the subway cars. The subway was in compartments. You'd have action going on in where the motorman was, and then you'd see equal action going on through the aisle of the train car. And it's that's all the work of the camera, right?
Yeah.
And so it felt very much like the camera, and by extension the cinematographer, was authorial in this movie. And I also then did not see that in Network, which we could talk about when that comes. But that felt like Roizman being in service of large-scale production, that he was then also able to bring his expertise of working in commercials to like television style shooting.
Right.
So there's this mix of that in that film. But this is the one of the three where I was like, I'm very conscious about how the camera is playing me as an audience member in this.
Absolutely.
Like, of the three movies we're discussing, this is maybe the one that has his deepest imprint.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, and to your point, Brendan, one of my favorite shots in the movie comes very early on. I think it's really the first shot that takes place when the train is fully stopped, once it's been taken over. And it's just this wide shot from outside the front exterior of the train where you can see it really is just shown like as it is meant to be, in almost like a blueprint image, where the motorman's cab is on the left side of the screen, and then there are those kids playing by the door.
You see them bouncing up and down.
Exactly.
Yep.
And the conversation that happens between the motorman and Mr. Blue and Mr. Green, still, it's still the first thing you hear. It's as if it's the first thing happening right in front of you, but it's really shown as part of this greater tableau.
Oh, and that's like a great New York moment where it's like something evil is happening here, and like literally right next to it is
Children
kids playing.
And leading up to that too, another great, you can call it a New York moment where like the motorman and Mr. Green, who like the motorman quickly realizes that Mr. Green is a former motorman himself, and they start asking each other questions about their work, and it's like almost like forgetting like, all right, this guy's holding me hostage. Oh yeah, and that motorman too is James Broderick, who's also the FBI agent in Dog Day Afternoon.
Right.
Here we go.
Connecting
All
these movies,
interrelated.
and then going back to this idea of contrast, you get the darkness of the train and the tunnel around it contrasted with the control room, the command center, which is this like bright but windowless space. Still, and I feel like the outfit that Walter Matthau wears in there really complements it nicely with that yellow
tie, man. It's
rocking it 30 years before Dwight Schrute.
Very true. I think it's so emblematic of the fact that he probably doesn't care too much about his wardrobe. He's just like kind of has to put something on.
Well, I was also thinking like this is supposed to be kind of an important day. Like he needs to put on a good image because he's showing these people around. So I'm like, does he normally wear a tie, or is this his only tie? He's like, it doesn't actually match my outfit, but it's the only one I own, and today I really need to wear a tie.
There's definitely that,
And the element that's in the French Connection that exists in Pelham 1, 2, 3 too, of like international perspectives as well. It comes across in that opening scene with Matthau, with all the subway executives from Tokyo visiting.
Yeah.
And, he thinks that they can't understand him, and then it's revealed that they can understand him.
Yeah,
and they still treat him graciously.
Yeah, I appreciate how respectful they are, even though he does not deserve it.
Yeah.
Because at first, as this is happening, and he's like calling them dummies, and I was like, man, this guy like kind of sucks. He's being incredibly rude to these people. So I like that the movie is in on that. I like that the movie brings it back around with like, oh, they've understood him this whole time. Again, a worse movie would not do that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. But then also, to this point of like international perspectives, that Mr. Blue, the Robert Shaw character who's leading this group of bandits, he is an Englishman. And in some ways, I don't know if he knows the subway system better than a New Yorker, but he's certainly willing to use it more audaciously than people entrenched in the system are, with the help of Mr. Green, who is himself a former motorman.
I also feel like it was probably at the time kind of very relatable to New Yorkers, and therefore making him a kind of worthy adversary, that he knew to use bureaucracy against itself.
Yeah.
I love that about this movie.
That he was like, we know how this will drag out if we don't give a time frame, right?
Yeah.
You give them 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is like I just maybe again it's like part of my background and like hearing like my dad complain about like red tape and stuff. But like I definitely was very conscious of that like New Yorkers just want shit to get done and like get rid of this hassle. It's like, you know, the one guy who gets shot who is in charge of the signal room, right?
Yeah,
And it like all that guy wants is for the thing to run the way it runs every day. And this one day it's not running that way. And so everything's ruined. And he's going to get...
Now, I've got to go down there and fix it.
He's going to fire people. Like he keeps saying, like, I'm going to have his ass. And it's like that's another thing that undercurrent through the movie. It's like people just worried for their jobs. Like those cops that are like, oh man, we're totally screwed if we don't get this money on time.
And the mayor too. That
Yes.
I love the mayor in this. I love the fun symmetry of him having a cold and Mr. Green having a cold.
Yeah.
By the way, how weird is it that mayor is like Ed Koch?
Before.
And it was not Ed Koch at the
Yeah.
time. Yes.
I was
So
going to bring
weird.
this up if
Yeah.
no one else did.
That same actor is the mayor in Batman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I remember seeing Batman in the theater in New York City, and everyone laughed when he showed up because Koch had just ended his term as mayor.
Yeah, he just
But
finished.
but everybody knew, like, oh look, they have Mayor Koch look-alike in the movie, and he's in this movie.
Yeah.
Before Koch was actually mayor.
And
Yeah.
also before Abe Beam had just gotten elected, so it's like he's not a parody of him, and he doesn't look like John Lindsay, so it's like people just know the general DNA of a New York mayor because this
I
guy's
love that,
kind of
yeah.
like De Blasio too, like he's got a little Bloomberg in him. Like there's just
Definitely
like
see the Bloomberg.
there's just
yeah.
like a guy who becomes the mayor of New York.
And they cast the right guy.
I'm trying to find that actor's name right now. It's Lee Wallace.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lee Wallace.
Well, he does not appear to ever have actually run for mayor.
He's the mayor in something else too. Another Sidney Lumet movie. Might be the movie called Daniel that's based on the Book of Daniel.
Yeah,
He's also a mayor in that.
My goodness, there might be a unlikely shared universe there about all of his mayoral terms.
Wow. Yeah, but it's really a timeless portrayal of a New York mayor.
Yeah.
And also, did anyone else here catch who was playing his wife?
Yeah, Doris Roberts.
Yeah.
Yes, who we recently talked about. We recently did an episode on Hester Street.
Oh, nice.
Where she plays Mrs. Kowarski.
She's also in very briefly The Heartbreak Kid.
Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Yeah,
That's
was your unlikely shared
Another
universe.
potential shared universe
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
like
definitely.
that's the sister of Ray's mom or something, you know.
Yeah.
Totally. I love that.
I mean, she utters two of my favorite lines in the whole movie. Well, one of them is as, the mayor is descending the stairs for this conference about getting the money to these crooks. She says something like, Warren, would you tell him that other mayors have to live here after we're gone? To the deputy mayor after she sees that her husband is just dropping all of his tissues everywhere.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
that. I also love that next line. You said,
Look at you, a regular Fiorello LaGuardia. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
There are a couple moments in this that I just love where you get very honest responses from people where there's that cop that gets handed the bag of cash. He's like, is this what $1 million feels like?
Yeah, it's not. And what does the guy say? He's like, it's not how much it weighs; it's how much you spend.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. And then similarly, too, when they have to race down to it, the cop, is there. He's got the motorcycle escort in front of him. He's like, I've always wanted to do this. And it's just like so rooted in reality. Like I hear that and I'm like, of course you've wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Of
That's like
course you want to
why
know
you became a cop. is to
Exactly.
do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I just love that. It's so
that
good.
makes me think of like the Nick Frost character in Hot Fuzz, who just watches buddy cop movies and just gets that moment where he gets to fire at the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
movie also has tremendous character actors
Yeah.
in it, and
Definitely.
like that, it is a thing I miss in movies. Is like people who look like real people, and like
Oh, yeah.
I think a big problem is that it's just you probably have to be like too rich to be a person who like actively can pursue this nowadays.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just too
Yep.
difficult to be like someone just in off the bus from Iowa or whatever.
Yeah.
But like back then, that's where these people were coming from.
Yeah.
Still, like this was they I always think of like a guy like Ed Asner, somebody who came from
Totally,
like the
yeah.
Midwest and was like, I worked on steel, and now I'm here, and I'll work with Stella Adler or whoever, and now I'm, an actual actor, gets put in things, and I look the way I look, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And this movie has that up and down the line, men, women, children, like everybody just kind of looks like a real person. And then every now and then I'm like, wait, I think I know that guy from something. And like it winds up being Baron Harkonnen from Dune. Right?
Yeah.
Like is the guy on the
Very different.
the
milieu.
guy on the CB radio at the cop who's communicating with them to get the money. Right?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's him from Dune.
Oh, no
Wow.
way.
Wow.
Cool.
Nice. Good pull.
And then we haven't even mentioned Jerry Stiller.
Exactly,
Who,
yeah.
this is his first credited film role.
Wow.
Is
I
it
didn't know
really?
that.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that
Which
either.
is insane.
Yeah.
He's really good in it.
He's so good that I figured he was established.
Yeah.
Same.
Like I thought they were giving him little star moments, right? Like, the audience will like this. They know who Jerry Stiller is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that, it surprised me to that point. It surprised me, too, that he is not very high build on the credits.
Yeah.
Even though he has a significant role in the movie, but I think he is at that time kind of just considered another one of these character actors.
Yeah.
But, when we know him from in the case of this podcast specifically, Hairspray, or of course, Seinfeld, we just imprint what we have come to know of him on the earliest version of him. And he has some of my favorite line deliveries in the whole movie too, where, when he's in the scene where he's introduced, that he says something about, we had a bomb scare in the Bronx on Saturday, but it turned out to be a cantaloupe.
Yes. Oh, that's so good.
And then later on, when the hijacking has begun, Garber is telling him, and this character that Jerry Stiller is playing is named Rico Patrone. He's telling him, you're not going to believe this. And he's like, you know me, I'll believe it. The train's been hijacked. I don't believe it.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about Hector Elizondo.
No.
It's true.
So I grew up knowing him as the hotel manager in Pretty Woman.
Oh, yeah.
He also is in a remake of Eat, Drink, Man, Woman called Tortilla Soup.
Right.
The first time I saw this movie, I was like, that guy?
Yeah.
That guy is like the crazy lunatic. Because most people in this movie seem to be on some level of either indifferent or upset that they have to be at work that day. And he's the only one who's wants to start some shit. Like he's going to get really excited if he gets to fire his gun.
Yeah, to be a complete sociopath.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. It's so not how I think he's come to be known. He's the cuddly, Latino grandfather.
Yeah.
He was in all of Gary Marshall's movies.
Exactly.
To the point where in the credits, he would list him as usual, Hector Elizondo.
I love that though. But he reminded me of we brought up Heat earlier.
Yeah.
He reminds me of the Waingro character in that.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
And I mean, this movie famously gives Quentin Tarantino his color coding device for Reservoir Dogs. And then, I mean, it's Mr. Gray that Hector Elizondo plays here. And as a character, he's much like Mr. Blonde in Reservoir Dogs.
Exactly.
The Michael Madsen character.
There's even a little bit of an overlap in the speech he gives to Mr. Blue about himself. It's like, hey, listen, I don't take any orders from anybody.
Very true.
I do my own killing.
And in Reservoir Dogs, it's presented very saliently when the Harvey Keitel character just keeps screaming, he's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they hadn't done what I told them not to do.
There you go. Yep.
I really just wanted to shout out the runaway train sequence.
Oh, yeah, of
it's so
course.
good.
It's shot so well. And my understanding, and Emilio, you would probably know this better than I, is that they had to actually speed up the film.
Yeah.
Because you can't get a train to go that fast.
Under cranking. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Which was something that had to be done in the French Connection in particular for that one shot where the train nearly crashes into adjacent train.
Yeah.
Right.
They might have even filmed that one backwards. That's what they do
did.
a lot.
Yeah, they filmed it
That
backwards.
would make sense.
Yeah.
And then Friedkin said it was undercranked. So that's one of those moments you watch it and you're like, there's no substitute for that. Thank goodness the camera was okay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
It's like something has to stop trains in both of these movies, whether it be another train or the way it's finally stopped in Pelham.
Right.
It's like these are just they're out of control. And
Yeah.
I found it very interesting because the thing in Pelham is like, the dead man's
Dead man switch?
The
Yeah.
dead
Yeah.
man
Dead man
switch,
switch, yeah.
which is apparently a fake thing.
Interesting.
Apparently, the transit authority was like, well, we can't have this be too accurate because we can't have it be like a playbook for how people can hijack trains.
Oh, that makes sense.
The dead man switch is not a real thing. But I found it very interesting because in French Connection, the motorman actually does have a heart attack.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, good point.
Do you know what else is some detail detail about the trains from this movie that is, a neat little bit of trivia. So, as you mentioned, this was like the train movie, and it had like the full cooperation of the transit authority. Like they worked with the film.
That's awesome.
The one thing that they said that they could not do was keep the graffiti on the trains.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
or on the platforms.
Yeah, they made sure there was no graffiti. And the filmmakers were like, the audience is going to reject the movie because they're not going to buy it that this is New York, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, that's for you to figure out. So, like, and if you notice with the movie, there's not a lot of like, loving shots of the exteriors of the trains sitting in the stations. Like you could kind of trick your brain into thinking that they look dirty or they're whatever, that there might be graffiti on them. I mean, at the time, if you've seen footage of like, 70s train yards, like the graffiti was all over the trains.
Yeah.
But the interesting quote I saw was that somebody from the transit authority was like, it's a passing fad. By the time your movie comes out, this graffiti might not even be happening anymore. So I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one example of graffiti on the train that I can think of in film is in Saturday Night Fever, which is after Pelham 123 by a few years. So clearly that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But speaking of train exteriors, and this is the last little detail I'll shout out here, but there's a couple moments in that climactic scene of the train rolling down the tunnel where you see it externally in a few stations, I think most notably in Union Square. And if you look closely, you can see it's still the same train car. There's like the same ads on the walls. The passengers are inside. It's not something that they just let happen too quickly for anyone to see. They're like, the details are there. The care was placed into it.
I appreciate that.
And, it's like, well, recently on the podcast, we had Rob McClure as a guest, and he, there were, I think, two phrases he gave us in that conversation that we keep on using. One is actually, and the other that really applies for this movie is they did that.
That's true. I love that.
Well, I think, are we ready to say Gesundheit to Pelham 123?
I think so. Yeah. But we're going to jump into our third and final film for at least this conversation. It's so funny because I do feel like each one of these movies could be a 2.5 hour talk.
100%.
Yeah.
But no, we're going to talk about Network. That is Sidney Lumet's film from 1976. I'll set it up here. It's 1975, and Howard Beale, he's struggling.
Yeah.
He has been the lead news anchor for UBS for a few decades now, but some professional and private struggles have led to him being fired by his understanding friend and cohort, Max Schumacher. Depressed and stressed, Beale says on air that he's going to kill himself on the air in just a few days. The professionally minded execs at UBS are shocked and scared for Beale's mental health. But a young female programmer named Diana Christensen sees an opportunity. Beale's mania has caused UBS's viewership to spike, and she believes going to that well over and over again, repackaging Beale as the mad prophet of the airwaves, is going to be good business for them. As she tells Max, TV is showbiz, and even the news has to have a little showmanship, adding that their news is already pretty sensational. So, quote, if you're going to hustle, at least do it right. So Max greenlights this show, and Beale's new persona takes off, but in ways that trigger alarm bells for UBS and CCA, the parent company of UBS, that operates in surprisingly nefarious ways to protect its interests.
That's Network.
That's Network.
Yeah. Network. Yeah, not other things like the Social Network or broadcast news.
And this is a good point, yes.
Network 1976. This was a first-time view for me. I've known about the movie kind of as long as I've, known about important movies in general. In fact, my first exposure to Network was this. When I was a kid, I had this Simpsons calendar one year that I think just like kind of spoofed a bunch of famous images from popular or well-known movies. And it just had an image of the Simpsons news anchor, Kent Brockman, in place of Peter Finch as Howard Beale in his I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore freeze frame. And that was how I was introduced to the movie. I've heard a lot of good things about it. Now I've finally seen it. I get the hype. I think it's kind of a masterpiece.
Totally. This is once again a movie I had not seen before. Sometimes with these close-ups, I end up having never seen any of the movies. And then I'm like, oh, I have 3 new movies to watch and absorb in preparation. I really enjoyed all 3 of these. I think this was my favorite. I mean, Emilio, you've been hyping this movie up to Julian and I for a really long time, like as long as we've been doing the podcast, I think.
Yeah, that's true. This is definitely one of my favorite movies.
And you were like, I'm so excited for you guys to watch Network. And
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
I am so glad to hear that. How about you, Brendan? What's your exposure to this film?
So it's interesting. I have a kind of like a before version of exposure and then an after version of exposure to this. The before times for me was I watched it for the first time when I was in college. I absolutely already knew all the pop culture references around it. Grew up a Mets fan. You go to Shea Stadium, they put Peter Finch on the board, saying, I want you to get up, I want you to stand up and say real loud. And he would, before he'd say, I'm mad as hell, it would switch to, let's go Mets. And they'd have the whole crowd chant.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And every now and then they bring it back. They bring it back as like a classic callback at the stadium. But so I knew all that stuff. I was also like, obsessed with like the Oscars. And so I knew like the lore about this movie. It had these like kind
unusual
of interesting Oscar wins, right? And posthumous wins. And so I had all that in my head. I watched it, as I said, in college, and I was kind of at an old enough age to get the satire of it, get what was relevant even in 1999 or whenever that was, versus 1976. And then I kind of just like, that was it. That was Network. That was my experience with it. The after part is that in 2009, I started working for MSNBC. And I think that I was conscious of the fact that so much of what my life was at the time was similar to the satire of Network, but for real.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I then actually watched the movie again, which I had not seen it since seeing it in college. Watching it again while I was several years into working in television news, like it was a borderline religious experience and like soul-crushing, depressing experience.
I can totally see that. Yeah.
Like there was a moment when I was working on the Keith Olbermann show. The moment, it was the day he quit the show. And none of us knew it was going to happen. And he quit on the air. The executives knew it, but they kept it quiet because they didn't want it getting out in the press before it was his thing. He wanted to make the announcement and whatever. And there had been strife between them. So it was this like big deal. And we were just sitting in like the control room, and before he went to break, there was one person that knew so that they could make sure everything went
Someone
okay.
could quiet people to be like, it's cool. Yeah.
But he said, this will be my final edition of Countdown. I'll to explain more after the break. And we were all like, what the fuck is going on? And then afterwards, we got ushered into a boardroom, and all the bosses from NBC Universal came in. It was that scene in Network.
Oh my God.
When they're watching the TV of all the other anchors covering their show.
Yeah.
We were doing that. Like I'm sitting there in this room. We're waiting for the bosses to come in, and Anderson Cooper is on the TV talking about the thing that just happened down the hall from me. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then I remember watching Network again and being like, it happened in my life, which is oddly the only other thing I can say where that I had that same parallel was 30 Rock. Like there would be so many episodes of 30 Rock that were being shot in locations that I would go to in the building, and they'd be doing the same things I would do in there, like in the commissary or whatever. And I'm like, that's weird, man. That's like being in your house.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah. The depressing side of that was knowing that it was every year just getting worse.
Yeah.
Like there was no improvement to the kind of I don't know if you want to call it cautionary tale or warning of Network. It was just snowballing worse and worse every time. I can even remember it before I started working in cable news and was working in radio. A guy I was working with had come over from CNN, and he was like, yeah, we had a pet psychic on at 8 o'clock prime time. It's like it's that scene in Network.
Yeah,
you know?
100%. Yeah, my God.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that prescience is something that is unmistakable if you see that movie now. I saw this movie, I think I saw it in college too. This is one of those movies that just hit me right away. I was like, holy cow, what a fucking good script. Insanely good script. I also think it's incredibly acted. I think it looks amazing. I think it has a lot to do with Sidney Lumet, but also Owen Roizman. And after reading a little bit more about, how he thinks and how he works with directors, I'm like, this dude definitely did have an imprint on this film in some way. This is maybe my third or fourth time seeing it. Every time I finish this movie, I'm like, I think this is unmistakably one of the 10 best movies ever made.
Wow.
I just feel it every time I see it. That's how this movie registers for me. I think it is so funny. I think it is also, like you said, I think a kind of a sad film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to watch this movie and not have it be a mirror reflecting back on you.
It gets sadder every year. Like it's there is you two, having watched it for the first time, saw things that it parallels now that it did not parallel 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because a lot of times those things didn't exist. Or I was just there, she's explaining. She's basically, there's a scene where she's inventing reality television. And the way that it is shot, like that she's talking about, okay, well, we have this 8 minutes of the footage of this bank robbery. We'll get some people to script some things around it. So we have this foundational thing and everything else, and then we have a half hour of this scripted show. I'm like, that's how they make reality TV now. Like they do it that way.
And the other thing that I love and is also just like deeply depressing about it is that the ecumenical liberation army, that whole thread, they start as people that believe in something or claim to believe in something. And then by the time they've gone through that system, through that meat grinder,
they're like yelling about their ratings and like, we don't want to be on after him because he's messing up our ratings and that's going to mess up.
And they're just like, it's funny. And that's the thing about it. I mean, this script is just so bulletproof. Like you could just watch these scenes. One of our past guests, Idris Goodwin, talked about like pulling up movie scenes like they're songs. This movie to me has that quality.
I have done that with the Ned Beatty scene, like, maybe 3 dozen times.
He's phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Obviously.
I know.
I also just think that in 1976, this movie probably played much more broadly, like a much more broad satire. That's like you're talking about that ELA group, right? And the way that they react to the machinations of television and of the business of it, and to all the way up to that scene where she is screaming at Diana Christensen about following Howard Beale as a lead-in. He's smallpox, and I think the joke at the time was like, this is a radical, right? This is like the SLA, and we've seen them on TV throughout this decade, and we've seen their militance and their general disposition, and here it's being applied to something ridiculous. Well, now, like that temper tantrum is like de rigueur in newsrooms everywhere. Like,
I believe it.
I've seen the carbon copy of that in person, in the flesh, and for that same reason. This person before is killing me. You need to fire them. You need to cancel that show or whatever. And with all that like outrage, right? And it just, so watching it now, it's like, that just seems true. It's like, it doesn't seem like a satire.
But I think what makes it so good is the script. If the script wasn't so good, I think we would watch it and we'd be like, wow, this like predicted the future, but it wouldn't feel like we're brought on this journey.
Aaron Sorkin cites it as like one of his main inspirations.
I can see that.
He says that nothing, including 1984, has done a better job at predicting like a precipitous decline in a social standard.
And I mean, I would think too, I don't know if he's been on record saying it, but I would think that Jesse Armstrong, creator of Succession, that this is one of the main things in his playbook too. And, when you think about Succession, of course, I mean, the way that media plays into it is a super integral part. But something else about Network that made me think a lot of Succession is the way that allegiances change for the characters throughout the movie.
Totally.
And that you have some people who you think, just the moment you think that you can root for them, you can't.
Yeah, I mean, Lumet says so much that this is a film about corruption. And you see corruption from all angles and with all characters to varying degrees. And then he talks about like, also the camera is being corrupted. and the lighting is being corrupted. Like it looks completely different at the beginning of the movie than it does by the end.
Yeah.
We're talking about how impactful this movie was on watch, and Owen Roizman himself said that this was far and away the best script that he had read. Masters of Light, that book that I keep referring to, asserts by that at this point in his developing career, because he'd been about 5 or 6 years into a career as a DP cinematographer, he already had some juice. He was like, I want to work with good directors, with good scripts and good actors, and also, quote, to have the opportunity to do something visually.
And he's done The Exorcist by this point.
And he's done The Exorcist. Yeah, he's definitely punched his card by this point. So I'm wondering for you guys, like, are there any scenes in Network? I can think a couple. One of them I think already maybe came up, but a scene from Network that comes to mind where the dialogue is particularly enhanced by the film's like mood or its lighting or the aesthetic, the kinds of stuff that Owen Roizman might have had a particular hand in.
So when I think about scenes like of the category you just described, it's less one individual scene as much as a type of scene that comes up throughout this movie. And I think, especially when it comes to depicting New York, there's a lot of scenes that happen in, well, of course, in office interiors, but I'm thinking in particular of ones that happen in broad daylight, where you can see like the sun is shining through the windows and it's almost overexposed what's outside. And, I think the first, like not the first scene with Faye Dunaway's character, but like the first time you see her speaking to her underlings is a scene like that too. Also,
that scene.
Also the scene where Howard Beale's in the turtleneck talking about why not be the mad prophet. And that's another one where that aesthetic is there too. Even as it goes a little later into the movie, there's more scenes like it. But then where I notice it changes is, once it's becoming clear that Howard Beale is really starting to lose his marbles after he wanders out of Schumacher's apartment in the middle of the night. And he's on the street, that there's a frantic discussion happening between Schumacher and Diana Christensen inside of an office, and then it's raining outside too.
Yeah.
And even if it was just kind of circumstance of shooting, I think that it fits the change in the narrative very well there. And there's one little moment in that scene where you see the two of them standing alongside a wall sandwiched in between two windows where you can see the rain outside. And I feel like, well, there's symbolism right there.
Yeah, and I found it really incredible that Lumet said on the commentary that it was just raining that day. The first scene of that day, which is an interior that you're talking about, you can see the rain outside, and so they have to match it throughout the day. And I'm like, so you're telling me that night when Howard comes in completely drenched, was that not planned and they just had to make it raining? Because I think that the fact that he is going on air completely drenched and seeming completely manic, it really adds to what he's saying. It even more so symbolizes his descent into madness. And so I love that it's possibly kind of they're working with what they've got. They're like, well, it's raining, so we've got to incorporate that somehow. And it's beautiful the way that it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, William Friedkin said something in the French Connection commentary about the movie God helping you out when you need it, and that's certainly a moment like that. How about you, Brendan?
I mean, we did mention the Ned Beatty scene, and I think like that's the scene where the lighting stands out the most deliberately, right? Because it's supposed to have this kind of church-like atmosphere, and it's done through this setting that you've seen already in the film, right? It's established that this is like the pencil pusher boardroom, right? And they have these green
library lamps.
Lamps. And, it feels like the action of going over to the wall and pressing the button so the curtains come down, the lights dim. It feels like a communion, right?
Yeah.
It feels like there's something spiritual about to happen. And the way it's shot, the way how they keep that distance from Ned Beatty, and that entire first part of his sermon is one shot, right? It doesn't cut away from it. There's no movement to it. You are in Beale's position, and he holds the camera there, and he lets those lamps do their job, right?
Totally.
And as then the monologue goes on, it's after he changes back to like his normal voice. It says, "Am I getting through to you?"
I love that phrase.
So that allows the movement to happen, right? So now you see a guy he starts the scene out by saying, "I'm a salesman. I'm going to sell you something." So now here comes the the
pitch,
move,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
yeah.
And the camera has to go along with that. But it never does anything to diminish that lighting. It never cheats in a way to say, like, all of a sudden, okay, we're up close to him. We're not using that light to actually illuminate the figure and see what you saw when you were back farther away.
I love that, yeah.
Is great because you're still Howard, right?
Yes.
You just now are in this free float, and it's reflected in Howard's face too, because it keeps showing him, and he's getting more and more jazzed up by this thing.
Yeah.
So like you can see his elation, and then you're feeling it by the way he's moving around this table. It's just a brilliant scene. It's no wonder that Ned Beatty got a nomination for this 5 minutes. Unfortunately, he didn't win, but that was, I think, Jason Robards won for All the President's Men. So tough competition. Beatrice Straight, although did win for her 5-minute scene in this film, which is still remains the shortest Oscar win ever for acting.
That's a curious scene, but I gotta say, she's very effective.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if
Orange.
maybe like it's worthy of the win.
I'm always an advocate of, I wish they gave more supporting actor and actress nominations to people with short roles. Like
I can see that.
I
yeah.
like that. Like, to me, that is the definition of support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they were there for a pivotal thing and they delivered, they did their job, you know.
They're there to serve the greater story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But interestingly, in this movie, like, is Howard Beale the lead role in the film? He won for Best Actor.
I had erroneously misremembered that he had won for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah, they were both nominated, him and William Holden.
I think, though, that's through the current filtering of how we process what a Best Supporting Acting nomination would be.
Yeah.
Right? Feels a lot more like that.
Yeah. Well, supposedly the stage adaptation of Network, it focuses even more on Howard Beale. Like, he's very clearly the main character on stage.
Yeah, and I think they've been. Was it Bryan Cranston?
Bryan Cranston.
I was going to say, if you get Bryan Cranston, for sure.
And while we're talking about that performance, I mean, another very memorable film performance that this reminded me a lot of that came about 30 years later was Tom Wilkinson's role in Michael Clayton.
I wrote that down in my notes.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that, like, this, like with Zero Dark 30 and the French Connection, how they don't seem connected, but I found myself thinking about it when I was watching it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Michael Clayton watching this.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know what movie I was thinking of? We've talked a little bit about it, Bulworth.
Oh,
This
yeah,
movie-
for
I
sure.
still have to
Yeah.
see that.
Well, Bulworth definitely pulled a lot from this.
Yeah, I would say so, for sure. The same idea of like somebody who's lost their mind and is just speaking truth is very prominent there.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention one thing really quick, which is that, this movie, I was able to find out, was shot on Kodak 7253 film stock, which was known for being very good at extremes. And that's what this movie has,
Totally.
right? Has moments with a lot of light, and then it has moments with very little light. You brought up this, and I love that you brought this up. And Owen Roizman talks about it in Masters of Light as being one of the trickier scenes that he's done, is that conversation between Diana and Max, and how that is kind of the turning point of the movie. But he said that it was really hard to do because for that scene, they shot day for night, and that 3 of the walls in that room had reflective windows.
I remember hearing this on the commentary.
Yeah, totally. And that this movie has a prominent female lead. And Owen Roizman talked about how he felt like it was really important for her to look like a movie star in this scene, have like a sense of glamour to her.
Yeah.
So he's like, where do we position these lights? And so he was like working to get really small, like 25-watt light bulbs, like kind of around and out of frame. But that whole scene is extremely choreographed. I mean, like a lot of things are.
But it would have to be specifically because of the glass windows.
Yes, and because of all of these constraints and stuff. I love how that scene, he's sitting in the chair, she's sitting up on the desk, kind of above him. And then they're kind of both standing, and then they kind of meet in profile for that moment where he's like, what are you doing for dinner? And she just picks up the phone.
And the camera doesn't even move.
Doesn't even move. She doesn't even move. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so fucking good.
It was really, really good.
Now, here's one question I had for everybody, though. Do you, especially the two of you who didn't see the movie before, do you buy their relationship?
My answer is no. I mean, so as a woman, this is the third of these 3 movies I watched, and I'm like, man, I really hope there's a prominent woman in this movie, because I've been seeing a lot of men over the last week. And so even though the movie and Lumet really do not want you to feel any amount of sympathy for Diana, I still have some amount of sympathy.
I did
for
too. Oh,
Diana.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard not to.
I
Yeah.
would say so, but I know that Lumet constantly talks about how he was telling Faye Dunaway, like, don't bring any kind of emotion, like, she shouldn't have any vulnerability, like, I'll cut it out if you try to sneak in vulnerability. And I was like, I feel like I sense some of that.
Well, I
Yeah.
also think that's that classic thing of directors just saying less to an
Yeah.
actor, and then they know that the actor will never give them nothing.
Yeah.
But that having them tamp it down will give that. It will be that imperceptible thing that just comes through anyway.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
No, that's a good
very
point.
good point.
Yeah, and I felt like watching that Faye Dunaway performance, I felt some shades of like an All About Eve type character, where it's, there's just like a desperate desire. I mean, I think in particular, one of the scenes you were referring to a minute ago, Emilio, of like when Diana admits to Max that she was his biggest fan years and years ago when she was a student. And that, like, she can come off as manipulative for many of her other details, but that's where I think you see a more sincere side of her.
Yeah, I do believe that. And I think it speaks to the fact that she is so attached to her work that her obsessive crush when she was younger still was somebody that was so entrenched in this world. I think that's why she kind of imprinted on him.
Yeah.
Is because he's so connected to the only thing she can express any amount of love for.
And I
very
think
true.
that's possibly why at the time, and maybe even for people who watched it afterwards, that relationship might have worked better than it did for you, because they came to it with the iconography of William Holden, of the matinee idol that he was, Sunset Boulevard or whatever else you
Bridge
had
on the River Kwai,
in your head.
Sabrina,
Right, he's got his shirt off and he's a strapping man, and he's, he aged quite a bit between then. He's still not quite 60 in this movie, but he looks his age, and I'm sure a lot of that came out of the bottle, and it was, it happened, it's hard living. It'll do that to you. And I just wonder if the movie banked on that to help deliver what is not, I don't think, completely convincing as a relationship as it is on the page.
Well, I think part of the reason I'm not bought into their relationship is that I don't necessarily buy his, like, not that I don't buy his attraction to her. She's a very attractive woman, but he's kind of like blowing up his life for her. And she's kind of given him no reason to do that other than the fact that she's like very hot.
Yeah.
Right. I think if you want to play devil's advocate on this, Sidney Lumet has talked about how he was like, he felt like he had to give something up of himself in order for this character to really come across. And so there's a little bit of that. I mean, I would think like giving up his job is maybe a sacrifice.
Yeah.
But maybe taking it this step further is just a way of him feeling like there's some sort of atonement for his actions. And so maybe there's a little bit of that happening.
But if you're feeling some kind of guilt for doing this to your friend, then maybe like save your friend, like maybe try to dig him out of this hole that he's fallen into.
There is that one line though where he says, and I believe the character is honest in saying this, when the wife asks him if he loves her, and he says, I don't know that I'm able to feel much of anything anymore. And
that's a good point.
I do think that the degeneration of everything that you're seeing from the media perspective, it's like that's happened to these guys personally.
Yeah. I think in interpreting that, that relationship, that was the first scene that I thought of too, just the way that Max Schumacher just admits that about himself in that Oscar-winning scene for Beatrice Straight. And I feel like part of what is really effective about that scene is, well, not just the Beatrice Straight performance opposite him, but the chemistry of those two, the sense that like she is, playing this very amped up character in that moment, and that he is really sullen. And that, he's just, you sense how overwhelmed he is by the world around him, when you see his responses or lack of response to her reactions in that scene.
But then once she kind of starts to calm down a little bit, obviously she's still very angry. I really buy into their marriage and their relationship.
Yeah.
Me too.
Because there's this honesty where he's telling her about, Diana has all these like scripts of how this is going to end. And like, there's one where I kill myself, and like the wife is like kind of giggling and like, oh, I forget exactly what her line is, but basically like, you've got a tough road ahead of you.
That was it.
That's what it is. Something like that. Yeah.
And I think that you still see so much love between them and so much
100%.
understanding between them, even though the husband is telling the wife, like, I am having an affair. There's still some respect. And there's that they're saying to each other, like, I still want you to be okay.
In very little time with very few words, you see almost a fully realized relationship.
And I think I just never see that kind of chemistry between Max and Diana is all I'm saying.
No. I think it's a perfectly good point.
I still totally buy everything that I'm hearing as far as Max's motivations for why he would enter this relationship. I just don't buy that they actually care about each other at all.
Right.
No, that's true. I've always swept that in the like satire realm of this film.
Yeah, I certainly don't consider any of this to be like a flaw of the film. I think it's more of a feature of the film.
Yeah. And getting back to like great imagery in the film pertaining to that relationship as the film nears its close. There's a sequence where, at this point, Max has moved out of his own home and is living with Diana Christensen in her apartment. And then they have an argument in one scene. And what struck me about that scene is that you don't see any, going back to this motif from earlier, you don't see any windows in that scene. It's in a windowless space. It feels very claustrophobic, even though it's in the same apartment.
It's like a kitchen or something.
It's it's in a kitchen. It's mostly shot in close up. Funny little detail too. There is a poster for Singing in the Rain
over the toilet
in her bathroom. And I wondered if there was, a little bit of conscious homage there, because that is also a movie about the media paradigm shift at a different time.
That's a good point.
But then, there's another scene that happens a few minutes later where she is coming home from work, Diana, and then sees Max sleeping in a chair, and then there's a window above him. And immediately it's a little less claustrophobic. And it's almost, maybe I'm reading too deep into it, but I felt like there was almost a symbolism of Max, being asleep there, being a little bit freer with that window above him than Diana feels at that moment.
Yeah, possibly. It is intimated that Max, in some way, is able to retain some of himself through this. Yeah,
possibly a stretch to say, but I felt watching the movie, I think that Max might be the most sympathetic main character.
I would say so. This is one of my favorite William Holden performances, far and away.
Before we were on the mics, we were talking a little bit about A Face in the Crowd, which if you've seen that and Network Together, the comparison feels extremely obvious.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I feel like there's some easy character parallels to draw here, where Howard Beale is, of course, the Lonesome Rhodes. And then there's a lot in common between Diana Christensen and Marcia in A Face in the Crowd. And then, when it comes to Max Schumacher, I was thinking of the Walter Matthau character in A Face in the Crowd, Mel, who is like kind of the jaded industry veteran who, he doesn't exactly renounce his world, but he doesn't love that he's there either.
I see everything you're saying, but I also feel like you could put a little bit of Marcia on Max Schumacher.
I agree. Yeah.
He's the one who greenlights Howard's next stages and gives everybody permission essentially to use him the way that they want and exploit him. So,
yeah, and he comes to regret it too.
It's cool though. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
I just think this movie is a flat out masterpiece, and I'm so glad we talked about it.
Yeah.
Finally.
Thank you.
We've been trying to figure out a way to slot this one in for a while.
I know,
Yeah.
we really have, for sure.
Before we transition away from it, though, I have to shout out one really great New York moment specifically in it, which is, that famous catchphrase, "I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore," is what really gets most of the attention. But what happens after it really struck me too, where you see all those people sticking their heads out of windows and repeating it. And I feel like, the closest thing I've seen to anything like that in my lifetime is the cheering for essential workers during COVID.
Yeah, banging your pots and pans.
Yeah.
But also,
I feel like also when Biden's win was finally announced,
that's true.
Had like a similar
in November 2020.
reaction.
But then one of the ironies of that whole thing that I really appreciated, that this movie kind of, doesn't like ram it in your face, but it's there if you're looking for it, is that, all of these people are complaining about being generally mad about the state of their lives. And the rest of the movie is not about resolving the real problems that exist at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, especially when you think about like the disrepair that New York City specifically was in the era leading up to the release of this movie. It's like, there's nothing being done in what we see about like crime rates or, the city's bankruptcy or things like that.
Or everyone hijacking subway cars.
Or that, yeah. It's just there's kind of a stasis in that way. This movie, it doesn't show you as much of like exterior New York as the other two we talked about, but I think when it does, it's still as potent.
I really like the angles that Roizman chooses in that scene where everyone's yelling out the window, because you get like a wide angle of like a huge building, but it's not like every single window has somebody in it. It's kind of like interspersed throughout, and then you've got these like very tight angles also. It's really, really excellent.
Definitely. Agreed. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about this?
I just think it's like, to go back to my own personal feeling about there being a kind of like before and after of it for me. I feel like before I started working in television, this movie is the type of New York movie that's like the secret of New York, like the places of power, high rises, corner offices.
I'm with you.
You're up in the sky and that. And so like I had that in my mind as like, ivory tower type of stuff. And then I actually wound up living in that environment. And now it feels as relatable to me as like the way I felt about being in the subway in Pelham, right? Now I do feel this as New York. And I don't mean that just from what my particular job is. I'm sure there's lots of people who have that same acknowledgement of that type of New York.
Yeah,
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, where that hits close to home for me. So like, I don't do it anymore, but a few years ago, as part of, working for the music school that the three of us co-hosts do, I was teaching lessons in people's homes. And without, pointing to anyone specifically, I sometimes would teach lessons in buildings kind of like that.
Yeah.
Where as much as they are residential, there's still this sense of like, you're given access to the ivory tower.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generational wealth in this small area.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, okay, so this is as detailed as I'm going to get, but one of those homes was near the stop where Pelham 123 begins.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bringing it all full circle. I love that.
Indeed. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to shout out is a few close-ups ago, we talked about various movies of actors portraying Richard Nixon. And I really like the one offline about like, you better not have any hidden microphones in this office.
Very cool. Are there any last things we want to mention about Owen Roizman himself?
Well, I think that it would be erroneous to say that the movies speak for themselves because we've just spent hours talking about them.
True.
But I think, if you see the work, if you're like new to seeing his movies, I think that the appeal is immediate. And when I think of like iconic settings of New York on film, I think, he's probably certainly the first name I think of visually. And his movies are right up there too. There's others. I mean, I think there are other equally great things, be it Dog Day Afternoon or Midnight Cowboy, things that come out around that time that are shot by different people, but that he's up there with all of the best in the pantheon of great depictors of New York.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that he's also the cinematographer for the Liza Minnelli TV special.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's cool.
I'm just excited to rewatch some other Roizman movies, and I think I'll have a newfound appreciation for The Heartbreak Kid and Tootsie. And others.
Tootsie. I'm so glad we brought that one up. Yeah.
And The Exorcist, too. And funny enough, I think that of all the three movies that we discussed, I feel like the one that's visually the closest to The Exorcist is Network, which is...
in some ways.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I mean, that scene of Howard talking to himself when he's in bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the moment where I was like, okay, yep, same guy as The Exorcist.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to enjoy watching The Addams Family, which I never knew was shot by him.
Oh.
Particularly because that's a Barry Sonnenfeld movie, and like I just feel like who himself was a cinematographer.
Yeah.
And I think like, oh, that's his thing, like his style. It feels very much like a Sonnenfeld. But I'd be interested to watch it now with this kind of very early street-based filming that we saw in these three films and watch it through this kind of fantastical lens of the Addams Family with all this production design and set deck and special effects.
Yeah,
Totally.
I suppose it
like
would be
that.
like a mix of the sensibilities, like the street sensibilities of these three films with some of that Exorcist juice too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll actually point to that. So you talked about Addams Family. I want to say that's one of the last films that Owen Roizman was a cinematographer on. He lived to be well into his 80s,
Yeah.
but I think he stopped working on films somewhere in like the late 90s or so.
Yeah.
He
I'm
had
saying 1995.
1995. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was like a
credit.
good 20 plus years where he was not working in films. One of the things that I found out just by listening to that Legends of Film podcast is he got really into still photography.
Hmm.
Cool.
And he delighted in the fact that it was something where, like, if he made a mistake, he had nobody to blame but himself. And so I find it really cool that he put in like a quarter of a century being a steward, I think, for a lot of directors and having a real workmanlike attitude for the work, and obviously committing great stuff to film, but that he really kind of spent the last years of his life just getting to do the kind of stuff that he wanted, very much out of the limelight. But I thought that was kind of cool.
One of those things that I saw, that he became a hobbyist magician.
Oh, that's
Wow.
awesome.
Okay.
There was something about that I found very, like, I had a great appreciation for that. Not just because, like, I like, magic and I enjoy, like, up close card tricks
Oh, yeah,
and
me
stuff
too,
like
yeah.
that, but also, like, that's a perfect thing for, like, someone who makes movies to be interested in. Like, I mean, I romanticize the movies. I'm sure all three of you do as well. And it's like,
Sure.
there is magic being done. Like, you even talked about it, Julian, about, like, how did they do that shot in the motorman's booth? Like, yeah, you have to create illusion and you have to do things in camera at all times, not even just on effects films or anything like that. So there's just something nice about that when he stopped professional work, one of his enjoyments was making magic.
Yeah.
I
So
love
cool.
that. That's. I feel like it's a great place to end.
Yeah. I think it's universe sharing time.
I think
Totally.
it is too. Does anybody want to go first?
Well, Brendan, you said ahead of the conversation that you had one in mind.
I did, because, like, as this was brought up, that this is a regular segment that you do, and I have a kind of shared universe from the French Connection that I've basically had from the first time I ever saw it. And it's exactly what you guys do here. It was in my own headcanon of this, and Cloudy is played by Roy Scheider. And I think it's fair to say, I mean, we know from the end of the film, from the title card, that they're taken off the narcotics unit now.
Yep,
I
reassigned.
would think that Cloudy was also probably just not long for a partnership with Popeye,
Yeah.
particularly if they're put on, I don't know, The Beat or something, desk
Yeah.
jobs, who knows. And so I have always thought that Cloudy got the hell out of New York City. The crime will kill you there. And changed his name, Cloudy, very close to Brody,
Ooh.
and went and lived his life on beautiful Amity Island, and wound up, as we all do when we try to outrun our problems, we wind up ramming smack dab into them, is in a conundrum with a shark and winds up being partnered with basically Popeye of the Sea. And yes, so this is the shared universe where Jaws is a de facto sequel to The French Connection.
Yeah,
I love it.
lines
Naturally.
up so
It
perfectly.
really does.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I mean,
Yeah.
even in terms of just casting Roy Scheider in that role, I'm sure that was considered very abundantly.
Yeah.
I'm loving
yeah.
that. That's great.
Well, speaking of Roy Scheider, I would like to propose an alternative fate for the same character.
Do it.
So, keeping with what you said, Brendan, I agree that, yeah, Cloudy Russo is probably very disillusioned with police work after Popeye Doyle's rampage on Ward's Island, but he's still proud of his investigative achievements, and even though he's reassigned. So, yeah, he distances himself from Popeye and from policing at large for a while. He takes a bit of a personal hiatus. But after this is over, Cloudy Russo decides to redirect his investigative talents to something a little more covert. And through a mysterious contact, Russo becomes an agent for an ambiguously defined government agency. And, while he's doing this, he kind of reconnects with his brother, who he's been estranged from before, who is an intensely motivated graduate student. And he goes back, because he's kind of rekindling with his family, he goes back to using his family name, Levy, and insisting that people call him Doc instead of his real first name, Henry. Not much of an alias, but it's something. Newly minted as a semi-secret agent, Doc Levy dons the disguise of an oil company executive to conduct his assignments. And things get particularly interesting for him when he's made the courier of a set of diamonds entering the U.S. And simultaneously, he becomes suspicious of the motives of his Swiss girlfriend and begins suspecting that his admittedly conspiratorial job may be covering up something even more sinister than he initially would have thought.
I definitely know this one.
Yep.
Marathon Man.
That's the one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another great New York movie. We had talked about it a few weeks ago. You said you thought that Roizman might have shot that. It's actually Conrad Hall.
Oh, okay, that's it. I don't know why. It feels like an Owen Roizman
But I see
film.
what you mean there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's directed by John Schlesinger, released in 1976, right after Jaws.
For sure.
And another movie like Network that the fact that it is still something that feels relevant today is a sad thing about the state of the world.
Yes,
Yeah.
good point.
All right.
Do you want to go?
I can go. So, in The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, Mr. Gray is presented as we said, pretty much a sociopath. And of course, we see him taken down in a standoff with Mr. Blue at the end of the film. But isn't it kind of odd that Mr. Gray didn't come prepared to this heist to take a bullet to the chest? I'd wager to say that it's very possible he's wearing a bulletproof vest and he survives this encounter. However, this near-death experience motivates him to examine his life and change for the better. He moves back to his home country of Genovia. And uses his tough guy act to enter the world of security. Over the years, he softens in his demeanor, and he also becomes incredibly highly regarded in the world of security, and even becomes the personal bodyguard and confidant for the Queen of Genovia. So obviously, when Queen Clarice needs to venture to San Francisco to convince her long-lost granddaughter to ascend the throne of their country, Mr. Gray, or Joe, as he's now known, comes along for the ride. He becomes a bit of a mentor figure for Clarice's granddaughter and continues in this role as they return to Genovia, and the young woman prepares to become queen. Seeing him in this role may also help Clarice come to terms with her romantic feelings for Joe, which have been growing over the many years, and she may even propose marriage to him, but hopefully she doesn't find out about this crazy backstory.
That's true. That might put a crimp in things. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's maybe the biggest aesthetic leap that we've seen so far.
That's why I went for it.
Well done. The Princess Diaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
This came to me as I was falling asleep. I thought about doing the conversation because I just watched that movie a few weeks ago, and because we do see Doyle doing some wiretaps.
This is very
yes.
So I'm like, perhaps he shifts into that, but that felt a little too easy. So I wanted to go a little out of pocket with this one.
Well,
Nice.
Well done.
There is another member of those bandits that I think you could make a separate shared universe. It's a quick one because there's not much more to say. But, in a similar way, we see Mr. Brown get shot like in the back and he falls out of frame. And that's the last you ever see of him. So
yeah, he's probably okay.
And if he was okay, he'd have to get out of Dodge fast. They are going to identify him or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if he, tried to go, maybe went west, maybe to the Midwest, landed somewhere in suburban Detroit, kind of lived a solitary life there. And nobody really knew who he was, mostly because they never saw him very much. And that's because the actor, Earl Hindman, was playing another character where he was always behind a picket fence. And he is Wilson from Home Improvement.
Wow.
That's him?
That is.
Never would have
Dude,
guessed
my
that.
mind is blown.
Well, of course, because you never saw
Never
him.
saw him.
Yeah. And
Oh
yet-
my gosh. Yeah, he is a perfectly good reason to keep his face hidden.
Exactly.
He might be a wanted man.
That's why, right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Home Improvement, just new levels, man.
Yeah.
Incredible.
All right,
Awesome.
Emilio.
All right. I guess I'll close us off here. Well, when we meet Arthur Jensen, he's the sharp-tongued CCA chairman and chief stockholder who states his case to try to set Howard Beale straight and discourage messaging to viewers that could be harmful to CCA. While it has tremendous gravitas, we also see that it doesn't really have an effect on Beale. and the decision is made to kill him, making it look like the work of radical extremists. Now, I like to think, at least for now, that some of the grislier details of Network's ending actually lead to some third-party investigation, where some people have to answer for what happened to Howard Beale and who might have facilitated it. Perhaps some people at CCA. And let's face it, it probably doesn't take much more than a secretary or low-ranking employee to connect Jensen and Beale. So let's say that happens and things get a little dicey for Jensen and CCA. Based on the access that he gets and the power that he seems to wield, it would not surprise me at all if someone like Arthur Jensen operated in the kinds of circles that would rather easily give him a new identity. And that's what he does. He withdraws from his public career, slowly transforms himself into an unsuspecting academic by the name of David Martin. He becomes an economics professor at Grand Lakes University in the Midwest and quickly rises in the ranks to become dean of the entire college. Early in his time as Dean Martin, see what they did there? He receives a hefty donation from a successful business owner named Thornton Mellon, the father of a current student. This donation is for the construction of a new campus building for the business department, and as well as a bit of wheel greasing to fast-track Thornton's matriculation to the university, because you see, in a show of solidarity to his son who is struggling to find his way in college, Thornton decides to enroll himself at Grand Lakes University as well and get a degree. When Thornton is suspected of plagiarizing work by his snooty business professor, the matter is brought before Jensen, or Dean David Martin, and leaning on his cold-hearted understanding of the, quote, one holistic system of systems, the vast interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars, Jensen makes the determination that Thornton, a generous benefactor, is allowed to continue his studies at Grand Lakes University.
Hey, Shakespeare for everyone.
Very cool. Yes.
That is Back to School.
Back to School. Yes.
Awesome.
Have you guys seen Back to
I
School?
I have
not.
not. No.
I love Back to School. That is a wonderful 80s comedy. I highly recommend Back to School.
Cool.
And that's Ned Beatty.
That is Ned
who
Beatty.
connects
That's
those
right.
roles.
Yes, who is Arthur Jensen and delivers that amazing speech in Network.
Wow.
We did it, guys. Owen Roizman, 3 movies.
Yeah. And
Brendan,
there's
thank you so much for being here.
Oh
man.
my gosh,
Yeah.
thank you. This was a pleasure, and I always like talking about all kinds of movies, but New York ones are near and dear to my heart, and especially these.
Yeah,
wonderful.
absolutely.
And thanks for staying up late with us as we do this. We know that our parameters of recording this show, go outside of other people's scheduling
Hey,
frames.
it's in the title. Like, it's not like it was a
Exactly.
surprise.
People know
Well,
they're
that's
signing
good.
up
Yeah.
for.
Fair
That's
enough.
very
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the floor is kind of yours here. Is there anything you want to tell our listeners about?
Oh,
Where they
well,
can find you?
listen, if you want to hear me talk more about movies like this, as Julian mentioned, I do this on the full Maron bonus feed. That's part of the WTF Plus subscription. And so, yes, that is a paid subscription, but I kind of always feel a little like protective about it. That it's like, if I'm going to say, hey, yeah, come pay for this thing, I'm going to give you like enough stuff. So we do 2 bonus episodes every week. That's like 8 new episodes or more every month. And you also get full access to the WTF archives, all ad-free. I actually think it's kind of a bargain, like especially if you're kind of a fan of the show already. So come on, join us there. Do it for 1 month and then listen as much as you can and then drop it. I don't care. That's fine.
Well, speaking as a subscriber, I can attest it is very well worth the $5 a month that one pays for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
From the bottom of our hearts, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful to have your perspective here. Thank you
Yeah.
for this.
Hey, no, my pleasure. I'd love to come back.
We'd
Oh,
love
cool.
to have you.
Yeah,
we
we'd be
would.
delighted.
And really fast, we're just going to talk about because this is the end of our episode cycle. So we're going to really fast preview our next episode cycle.
Let's do it.
Which is one that's been floating around in my brain for quite some time. And in fact, I think is the first time that one of these episode cycles has been my brainchild. So I'm extra excited. In a few weeks, we'll be starting a cycle called Musicians Turned Actors, where we focus on musicians who make earnest attempts to fully delve into the world of cinema. And we are starting off this cycle with Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, released in 2021 and starring musician Alana Haim, along with non-musician, as far as I know, Cooper Hoffman.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe he plays guitar or something.
And this is one of those movies that we've made a lot of passing references to. And it's, maybe how like Nashville felt a year ago. We're finally making our way to it. I'm very excited.
I am super excited as well. And before we wrap, I also just want to say one quick thing, which is I'd like to shout out Dr. Aaron Hunter, who's a film professor in Ireland. I cold emailed him after hearing him speak about another great 1970s film that I love called Being There on the Projection Booth podcast. He is currently working on a project about 1970s cinematography. And he very graciously and generously pointed me in the direction of some resources that helped me today. So a huge shout out and a thanks to Dr. Aaron Hunter. I cannot wait to see what your upcoming work is like. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, in addition to this podcast, you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can contact us via email. Again, we love when we hear from you. Write to us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. If you're on Letterboxd, you can follow me at Patroness of Cats.
And you can follow me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold. If you are listening to us for the first time, thank you for finding us. If this is the third or fourth or 50th time you've listened to us, thanks for sticking with us. And if you're not already following us, please follow us. We have really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we'd ask you, return listener, to please write a positive review and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps. You can also keep it grassroots, and you can tell a friend to tell a friend about the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast. That helps too.
It's as late as hell, and we're not going to record this anymore.